Chapter 61. Fundamental Orders. 1. All free and equal individuals of the Virginia community have gathered to establish governance in accordance with the Lord's will on this land, to elevate justice, to guarantee everyone's rightful rights, and to provide protection to those in need of protection. We will provide goodwill and gifts to all who wish to be included in our community, and all who wish to be included in our community will return appropriate goodwill and gifts to the community. Also, this was the Fundamental Orders of Virginia. More precisely, it was what Mr. Nemo had copied and separately distributed to Bacon. Francis Bacon, now smoking tobacco he had learned from Manteo, slowly read through each clause. After the meeting ended, the fundamental law, which Hewitt, Harriet, Raleigh, and others had worked on for days and nights, contained all sorts of strange content. A clause stating that there is no tax that the state can first demand from individuals, and that the state only gives gifts and takes returns. A clause stating that since such gifts include land to cultivate, food to eat, and houses to live in, the government must provide such things. A clause stating that since all individuals are equal before the Lord, an assembly should be established where everyone can vote regardless of status and gender to establish laws and solve various problems. Many of the contents within the document still remain puzzling and unconvincing to contemporary analysts. The fascinating intersection of Algonquian customs and European common sense gave birth to remarkably strange and unique content that extended well beyond the established gift system. For example, the document contains a revolutionary clause stating that when someone dies intestate, without a specified will, property is distributed equally to all close relatives regardless of gender distinction. This progressive clause arose because many Algonquian communities maintained a matrilineal inheritance system, standing in stark contrast to European societies where patrilineal inheritance predominated. The Algonquian tradition of female leadership, including the presence of respected women chiefs, fundamentally shaped these inheritance provisions. Consequently, the document also enshrined women's right to vote, an extraordinary concept for the era that wouldn't be widely accepted in Western societies for centuries thereafter. Religious freedom is likewise guaranteed throughout the text. This was not merely an idealistic inclusion, but rather an inevitable practical clause necessary for Catholics, indigenous spirit worshippers, and Anglicans to coexist peacefully within the same governance framework. The pragmatic acknowledgement of religious plurality represented a significant departure from European norms of the period. Various other progressive contents are included throughout the document, but they were not entirely unfamiliar to Bacon's experienced eyes, as they were all ultimately legitimized through the Assembly's democratic verdict. These provisions, while revolutionary in many respects, maintained a framework of procedural legitimacy that satisfied European legal expectations while incorporating indigenous values and practices. Bacon briefly puts down the document he was holding and watches people chattering in the distance. Algonquians, Englishmen, and Spaniards were sharing jokes using a strange mixture of English and Algonquian language. They were chatting amongst themselves while pulling out weeds and, suddenly, as if they remembered something, they made the sign of the cross while looking far away. In the direction they turned, there was an excavator. The excavator was again pulling out tree roots and breaking rocks. It seemed to be preparing fields to distribute to new residents. Bacon unconsciously makes the sign of the cross following them. Everyone is equal, everyone is free, and everyone has what they need. Those European philosophers and distinguished teachers would likely assert that such a community cannot last long, that soon disorder, chaos, lawlessness, and immorality would prevail, and humans and beasts would mix. But, in Bacon's view, this place was surprisingly peaceful and prosperous. This Fundamental Orders of Virginia does not operate on its own. Behind those clauses, there is another authority that supervises and supports it. Therefore, this utopian community can continue. This prosperity can continue. Also, can grow. Listening carefully when the angel occasionally explains about his tools, they must be designed based on great scientific knowledge that people do not yet know well. They were clearly made through technologies too superior for people to possess. But will it always be that way? Will people never be able to make such things? Someday people will be able to explain everything in the language of mathematics. Certainly, That will happen. Bacon recalls the words Harriet had uttered. Ask, and I shall answer. Seek and seek again. Strive for knowledge and enlightenment. That is the second commandment I give to you. Bacon also recalls the words the angel gave to his apostles. Perhaps, there may come a day when this small community becomes a model for all mankind. Someday this community might become greater than any kingdom on earth, and the seeds of knowledge that Mr. Nemo has sown might bear incredibly valuable fruit. Thinking this, Bacon unconsciously wrote a phrase in his notebook. New Atlantis. One of the pioneers of utopian literature that should be published in 1628 was being written here and now. February 1594, on a hill on the east coast of America. Woo-woo! A cheer. As Bacon suddenly looked back, he saw a sail with an angel holding a saw and a lantern unfurled in the distance. A newly built ship was being launched. Look! Raleigh points to a newly launched ship with a broad smile. It's a clipper. A completed clipper. A fast transport vessel that can carry up to 8 cannons, enormous by the standards of this era. The ultimate sailing vessel made with engineering plastic and 21st century steel frames inside. Now, for at least 200 years, no ship greater than this will emerge. With that, we can travel across the Atlantic in just under a month. If we do well, we might even reach China or India. The Clipper is here. That great ship has finally been launched on the coast of Virginia. Recalling all the hardships we went through to build it, I also got teary-eyed. Really, with just a few of these, we can transport almost any goods. Chapter 62. Fundamental Orders. 2. Inside, there's also a warehouse equipped with urethane foam and various equipment, so it won't be difficult to deliver fruits even more freshly. Finally, I have achieved the great feat of full-scale export of American grapes to Europe. 15 minutes after hugging Raleigh and rejoicing, as the ship reaches the dock, Vicente walks towards me with a bright smile. I, truly, have never seen such a ship. This great ship will go down in history. Of course it will. It's the first ship made using plastic. What will you name the ship? Enterprise. A great name. Enterprise. Sorting through various idle thoughts, what needs to be done comes to mind. Walter. Yes, Mr. Nemo. How about you take a tour around the North American coast? Also to test the performance of that ship. Exploration, you mean?
No.
Not to that extent, just move along the nearby coast for now. And, do you still have the map I gave you last time? Of course I still have it. I still don't understand why there are no borders or important cities marked on that map. Of course I gave it without any markings. If I had given him a plain 21st century world map with letters like Washington, D.C. prominently displayed, who knows what misunderstandings it might cause. In the eyes of the Lord, do you think borders drawn by humans matter? Ah, of course. Indeed, having the name of an angel allows you to make up any excuse. I patted Raleigh on the shoulder to encourage him. Anyway, I'm glad you still have the map I gave you. Just lightly check how different the... Of course I should do that. I will definitely return after a successful voyage. While we're at it, let's adjust the discrepancy between 21st century and 16th century coastlines, and also test the performance of the newly built Clipper. After Raleigh departed northward, we gathered again for a regular meeting. Except for Raleigh and Vicente who had set sail, everyone who received a tablet sat before me, as well as other settler representatives. I presented a topographic map similar to what I had given to Raleigh, zoomed in on North America, and said, "This is a map of this land." Most of them didn't know the shape of the land they were living on. They looked at the map I presented with curiosity and passed it around among themselves. Only after that brief commotion ended could I speak. Here, who knows the geography of this area best? That would be Manteo. He's moved around the most for exchanges with other tribes. He's also looked at things similar to this map the most. Good. Manteo? Yes. When Manteo asked with apparent confusion, I handed him a set of crayons. From now on, we're going to draw a map of the forces in this area. We need to check how many forces are around us, and how large an area our force occupies compared to them. I see. Such a map would be convenient. I pushed the map toward Mantio, who answered like that. So first color our territory in blue, and draw other forces in red, green, yellow, and so on. Understood. The area our community occupies is roughly Croatan Island and the Chesapeake Bay area. More than 10,000 people live together there. Now that we've started a gift offensive toward tribes in various regions, it would be good to clearly understand the distribution of surrounding forces. We'll need to send envoys to each force, won't we? Well, it wouldn't be bad to go beyond that and precisely assess our capabilities and examine the situation of neighboring forces. Anyway, for any purpose, we need a map indicating the areas each force occupies. Since few among the American natives lead a completely settled life, the markings might not be accurate. But Mantio? Ah, yes. Why are you just standing there? Are you contemplating something? There are separate maps, so don't worry about ruining it and feel free to color. No, that's... Mantio squints at the map, turns to me, and asks, should I color rivers and seas too?
No.
I understand. Then what should be the criteria for our territory? Also, since there are smaller tribes within each force, it's difficult to determine the criteria for the power map. Alright, there are no fixed nations and borders in America. In other words, it's like the problem of deciding whether to color Hunan and Sichuan provinces entirely as Wei territory when drawing an early Three Kingdoms map of China, or to separately mark each vassal state within. To draw it properly, we need to set criteria. After thinking for a moment, I say, if you go west from our territory, there's the Powhatan Confederacy, isn't there? Yes, that's right. Think of coloring them as one color and color our territory. Ah, now I understand. Yes, now the map should come out soon. First, color Croatan Island, then color Chesapeake Bay. To the west of that, why are you coloring a red circle there? Ah, this is the Powhatan territory. But you haven't even colored our territory yet? Ah, that's... Swish, scratch. Roughly speaking, you're talking about the area that acknowledges our supremacy and our leadership, right? Yes. Mantio, but... Then except for the red circle I just made, everything up to the Great Mountains in the west would be our territory. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Mantio, coloring the vast area overlapping with that red circle entirely blue, says, phew, the map is big, so it was a bit hard to color it all. How is it? Mantio said proudly with his hands covered in blue crayon powder. And I, So the blue. Yes, the blue area is our territory. I saw the entire eastern parts of today's North Carolina and Virginia colored blue. Everything east of the Appalachian Mountains. All tribes within this area, except for the Powhatan tribe, will recognize Mr. Nemo as the Great Chief. The area was larger than the effective control area of Japan. No wonder the incoming resources were enormous. Chapter 63, Great Chief's Realm 1. I am Raleigh.
Raleigh.
Raleigh? Funny name. You are quite intelligent, Massasoit, learning basic English in just a month. Sing, pli. You people speak language similar to ours. Massasoit chuckles and says to Raleigh and Vicente, speak with similar language. Speak with English. Same. Understand quickly. Good. Very good. I should give a gift to a friend who learns our language so quickly. Rustle. Rustle. As Raleigh takes something out of his bag, Vicente quickly pulls out a Bible. Raleigh places a scepter in his hand and a crown on his head, while Vicente recites Bible verses and says, do you now recognize Nemo of Croatan as the Great Chief? Of course, if he is the wealthiest. Do you swear to receive gifts from Nemo of Croatan, and also to send gifts in return, firmly maintaining your faith and loyalty toward him? Gifts. Must. Continue. Excellent. Now you are a loyal subject of Mr. Nemo. Originally, they should have mentioned the Queen of England's name, but it was unlikely that the Queen would send someone all the way here to check and behead Raleigh for treason. Raleigh confidently offers a handshake to Massasoit and says in Algonquian, "You are now our comrade too. Let's work together for the Virginia community." Well, I won't ever go there in my lifetime. You never know, do you? Would you like us to take you there? Massasoit shook his head. He spoke in his native language, not English. This is my home, so I won't leave. You call this place Massachusetts? More precisely, Nemo had mentioned Massachusetts in front of them. The two men just remembered it. I won't leave Massachusetts, so you should return. Then, farewell. Raleigh nodded to him with a smile. Glory to our emperor, great chief, angel, whatever you call him. I hope to see you again. With that, Raleigh and Vicente leave the shore and board their boat. Thus, they continue their journey. This story took place quite some time after leaving Chesapeake Bay. I and other Europeans are speechless, staring intently at the map Manteo has colored. Since many natives don't know how to read maps, they just glance at each other, not knowing what's happening. But I could roughly tell from Manteo's expression. Even if other chiefs knew how to read maps, they wouldn't have been so surprised. Because for them, this is a natural situation. We organized a gift exchange network with enormous resources, and as a result, successfully brought numerous tribes under our influence. All achieved through grapes, aluminum, and other items. What is this? Why does my head understand but my heart refuses to? It's a similar sentiment to when the fate of the world is decided by a card game or soccer in a children's animation. I mean, no matter how delicious Shine Muscat is. Really? Conquering a land as large as Japan with it? It's nonsensical. You didn't know? I didn't know. But it's not nonsensical, they say. Yes, no matter how unbelievable, reality is reality. Then, those outsiders who sometimes lingered around during meetings, they are people who gathered because the great chief called a meeting. I explained the situation and sent them back, but they must have been somewhat dissatisfied. I'll mark such tribes with stripes. I see. Anyway, I barely managed to finish the meeting while trying to keep my head from spinning, and looking over the various areas Manteo had colored on the map. I sighed. So they've at least entered my sphere of influence? That's right. But they're not members of our community yet? Correct. If they are in my sphere of influence, and they recognize me as the great chief, am I their king? No. To them, I am, perhaps like a UN Secretary General. Roughly speaking, it's like having a presence that's neither here nor there. It's simple when I think about how I didn't even know I was a great chief until Oitoten called me one. Can I, as a great chief, demand them to fight for me? No. Or can I, as a monarch, give other orders? That's also not possible. Whether a chief or a great chief in this neighborhood, it's closer to an honorary position. It's somewhere between a group project leader and a village head. Whatever the case, for some reason, there was a strangely large amount of incoming resources. So I was distributing grapes across an area about the size of Japan. Everyone, I missed you. I missed Chesapeake so much. If you knew how many places we adventured to, you would be surprised. Oh, and not long after realizing this fact, Raleigh and Vicente returned. Welcome back. Now you need to go to England. What? Pardon? I am Spanish. Then let's exclude Vicente and just have Walter go. Various spices, sugar, various small tools, clothes for residents to wear. There are many necessities. After unloading pearls, coral, and all sorts of jewels in England, when Walter Raleigh returned, several more months had passed, and it was gradually becoming September. September, grape season, grapes overflow from everywhere. This time, without worrying about freshness, we could properly harvest most of the grapes at the optimal time. And the various new grapes I ambitiously cultivated this time. Ruby Roman, My Heart, Cotton Candy, and countless premium grapes worthy of being supplied to department stores bloom on Croatan and nearby islands. I used to pay royalties for some varieties, but now there's no entity to take those royalties. Neither the U.S. Department of Agriculture, nor the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries can stop me. Now, Walter, please work hard again. I've spent half the year at sea. Indeed, Walter's spirit of adventure is amazing. And the ambiguous climate of the North Atlantic can't stop me either. Now I can export grapes harvested at the optimal time across the sea in perfect condition. With a heart pounding with excitement, thinking I'm going to destroy all the English nobles' gums, I sent Raleigh off. Raleigh complained about how difficult it was to operate the clipper, the terrible steering difficulty, and the grinding labor of skilled sailors, but all those words only led me to the conclusion that I should send out a skilled captain. Then this time I'll stay in England for a while. I should attend Her Majesty the Queen's coronation anniversary banquet for once. I granted Raleigh's vacation. So Raleigh departed. I eat some leftover Shine Muscat and fall into thought. It's already the 6th year since I came to this land. These are Shine Muscats that I've maintained with all my might, continuously replanting and even trying flat roof cultivation methods. Grapes. Even though I'm called a great chief, I'm not an entity with real power like other great chiefs of this era. To many people, the grapes I grow are probably closer and more familiar than I am. Just as most grape farmers are to consumers. Yes, I'm just a grape farmer, but a farmer who has targeted a rather broad market. Thinking like that makes me feel a bit better. I chewed and swallowed another grape. Father, jewels are becoming scarce. Even nearby fur pelts are running dry. Is that so? Drought continued. With farming and hunting becoming difficult, it's not strange that foxes giving fur are becoming rare. Also, jewels don't grow like plants or animals, so naturally, they decrease as people pick and mine them. One cannot sustain oneself by clinging to disappearing things. Father, why did our tribe abandon our previous life? Why did we accept rather than reject or burn the grapes and those things called potatoes, offered by the so-called great chief? To survive. The chief smiled at his son's words and said, "Gifts weren't originally like this. Originally, gifts were mostly exchanges of more symbolic, valuable, and crudely speaking, useless items, like sharing necklaces made of coral and shells, or passing around elaborately decorated feather hats. Of course, it's natural since people had time to spare but not food. No one was that wealthy. No one could casually share gifts of food that could feed tribe members for months, as they do now. No one could offer rare fruits to those suffering from drought and famine, as they do now." Chapter 64. Great Chief's Realm, 2. The people of this tribe found it hard to believe whenever the great chief sent gifts. In a situation where everyone was starving, unable to find food, they continuously produced numerous fruits, as if molding them from clay. After the envoy they sent left, everyone from the chief to tribe members hurriedly ate potatoes and grapes. The beginning of everything was when they carelessly accepted the massive gift for the first time. The pain of famine continuing for years, hunger, disease. These things changed them again. Many tribe members now don't bother with farming that's about to fail anyway, and just roam around to obtain precious fur pelts. It's easier to exchange them with the great chief for food. The days of making gift ornaments in spare time after farming and hunting are gone. Now they only sow seeds and hunt meat if they have time after making ornaments. It wasn't just them. Some spend the entire day mining pearls. Some spend all day grinding coral to make beads. Some live day by day brushing fur pelts until they're beautiful. It was unprecedented. Europeans would call this division of labor. But the Algonquians in this region found the current situation so unfamiliar that they couldn't even find a word to describe it. Of course, they still don't buy and sell things like Europeans. They still only exchange gifts. More fur pelts for more potatoes and grapes, then even more fur pelts for even more potatoes and grapes. No one is bound by contracts. They are still free. But indeed, everything has changed. The wars that used to break out during famines are gone. They picked up thread, needles, and traps instead of bows, spears, and clubs. As a result, they gained peace instead of fighting. And, Life instead of death. Don't say that. Don't we now have to go deeper into the forest to get fur pelts? And we quarrel with other tribes there. That's true. Additionally, mining jewels has become increasingly difficult. Soon we'll starve to death. We must leave this area. No, that's not the case. The chief shakes his head at his son's worried words and says, I've heard that instead of recklessly killing large beasts, the great chief's tribe tames them, increases their numbers, and then eats them. What? Why don't we do the same? Tame foxes and eat their meat, and get fur at the same time. So, using foxes as livestock. As someone who has only tamed small animals, the son found the proposal absurd. We've never done that before, have we? First of all, don't foxes eat meat? Moreover, will foxes adapt well and live in the places we've prepared? We have to try. We'll probably face failure for several years. The chief's eyes shine. Aren't unprecedented things happening constantly? We must change too. Or at least change our hunting methods. But, have you ever seen a being like the great chief before? Why are you trying to respond in the way you know to a situation you don't know? If it really doesn't work, we'll just lead the tribe members to the great chief's land. Remember that a chief must make decisions that save the tribe members above all else. Anxiety was visible in the son's eyes. It was the look of someone afraid of change. But when days get shorter, there are no trees that keep summer like fresh leaves even when snow falls. Everything must change according to approaching changes. That's how to survive. Regardless of what his son thought about the great chief. The chief somehow felt his heart toughen when thinking about the great chief whose face he had never seen. Originally, you would have died fighting by now. What? I would have starved to death. But look, we both live to enjoy the night. The bonfire still burns, and the moon and stars blaze in your eyes. Don't you know who it's all thanks to? No one starves, no one dies. Even if there are no foxes left in this land, and all the rubies in surface mines disappear, they won't starve to death. The great chief they've heard about in rumors always welcomes new people. He's someone who doesn't let anyone who enters his embrace die carelessly. So they will survive. Thanks to a grape farmer they've never even seen. According to rumors, that grape farmer is a spirit who descended from heaven. That's why he's so wealthy, having brought heavenly treasures. According to more unbelievable rumors, that grape farmer is a being who doesn't experience death. Honestly, the chief didn't believe even half of these rumors. But regardless of which parts are true and which are false, hundreds of thousands of lives owed a great debt to that grape farmer. Originally, around this time, the population in this area would be wiped out by smallpox. The population in the southern Mississippi River Basin dies from epidemics transmitted from Spanish colonies. People nearby move north, and amid many people starving due to abnormal weather, the chaos in this region intensifies. The Powhatan Confederacy begins to rapidly expand while fighting wars with strange tribes that came down from northern New York and Pennsylvania to escape drought and famine. And after several decades, various tribes are defeated in wars with white people and fall. The same is true for the seemingly massive Powhatan Confederacy. They seem to succeed in mediation under the famous name of Pocahontas, but eventually collapse due to white invasions, and many tribes under them are forcibly relocated. Defeat, massacre, forced relocation, extinction, downfall. The history of native tribes in this region that follows is summarized like that. And they disappear from history as nothing. In the gorgeously bound volumes of American history, they are relegated to an area of just a few pages. Just as they lost their homes and were driven out. They were driven out not only from space but also from time. But now that won't happen. Thanks to the existence of one grape farmer. This was a debt that couldn't be repaid with any amount of gifts. If this unprecedented drought continues, the refugees heading toward Nemo's land would swell to hundreds of thousands in an instant. That's why that grape farmer was called their great chief. Chapter 65. Growing Pains, 1. This year, the grape harvest has been exceptionally good. The sugar content of the grapes came out much higher than when I farmed in the 21st century, and their size and flavor were overwhelmingly superior compared to last year. In addition, thanks to the newly expanded vineyards all yielding abundant harvests, the amount of grapes sent to the surrounding areas has increased accordingly. I can probably acquire that many more furs, pearls, and various luxury items. But why is the atmosphere here like this right now? Harriet? How many new people have arrived this time? Grapes are a crop that gets sweeter and better in quality as the weather gets drier. There's a reason why grape farming is difficult in Japan, where torrential rain pours down right before harvest season, and corn consumes a lot of water. The main crops of the natives in this area are corn and beans that have undergone almost no selective breeding. They're relatively drought-resistant and different from our crop varieties that have been improved over hundreds of years. Anyway, naturally, if water becomes scarce, wild animals won't thrive either. The amount of food obtained through hunting and gathering also plummets. Our record grape harvest means that the surrounding native tribes have experienced an unbelievable crop failure. So, 3,200 people. For reference, last month it was 2,500 people. The month before that also exceeded 3,000 people. It's now November 1594. In 3 months, our settlement's population has exceeded 20,000 people. With the population suddenly jumping to almost double, the administrative system we had carefully built began to totter. Since they arrived during the busy grape harvest season, we haven't even been able to properly distribute land to them yet. There isn't enough cleared land for thousands of people to farm yet. Projects like phosphate rock mine development and corn farming planned for next year or the year after have been tentatively cancelled. We're not short on food right away. Potatoes always yield well, and we have plenty of wheat stored in warehouses instead of eating it. We have enough to live on for several years even without farming. For now, we're mobilizing all the horses to plow the fields. Though not extensive, we should be able to prepare enough land for about 3,000 people to farm. I understand, Mr. Hewitt. Now I'm worried about what the remaining 5,000 people will do. But we're short on land. Eleanor, Vicente, and Mr. White couldn't come today either? Ah, yes. It seems they haven't finished organizing the lists yet. Even with mobilizing our tribe members, we're short on administrative capacity. We need to urgently procure timber. Right now, we need approximately 600 houses immediately. We'll have to tell the natives to build their own huts for now and gradually provide houses. We're short on houses too. The current meeting situation, with Walter Raleigh gone to England to sell grapes, and Vicente, Eleanor, and White all unable to attend, tells you everything. They're all too busy working to come here. We're short on everything. This is gonna drive me crazy. Step.
My God, mon Dieu.
Remarkable no matter when I see it. Such vast land. Isn't it too much that the English and Spanish try to monopolize such land? I even heard a cure for the plague came from here. How could God bestow such a blessing on those English Protestant bastards? Those English Protestant bastards supported our Majesty, did they not? François Grave Dupont and his nephew Samuel de Champlain carefully looked around while passing through unfamiliar grasses of America. Melons of mysterious appearance, over-ripened, have fallen to the ground and smashed, and passing wild animals and birds that were pecking at them run away sensing human presence. Strictly speaking, they don't monopolize it, since there are savages. Be careful. The English said that among the savages here, many are simple and good-natured, but originally those cunning folks often have shameless lies on their lips. Well, our explorers didn't say anything different. Saying that, François gestures, and the rest of the expedition members step forward bravely, walking between shallow grass and rough trees. And, swish, an arrow flies and sticks near François' foot. As everyone tenses up and raises their guns, François calms them down with an exaggerated gesture. Whoa, be careful. Didn't you see? Didn't an arrow just stick in a place far from my foot? It must be a warning. As long as we don't approach further. Hashtag at dollar hashtag percent. Hashtag dollar hashtag percent dollar. Soon, as an unknown language echoes through the forest, the atmosphere that Francois had barely calmed becomes tense again. As the brave men raise their arms, nearly naked warriors jump out from between the trees. As they aim various weapons, Francois also reluctantly swallows and raises his gun. Ah! If only they could communicate through language to resolve this situation. If it's going to be a bad encounter from the start, the only option is to kill before being killed. Having made that decision, Francois slightly places his hand on the trigger. Ha! Where? From? Someone mutters in a mumbling voice. For a moment, thinking it might be one of his subordinates, he looked back, but they too were just staring blankly ahead. Francois, filled with joy, puts down his gun and says,
France.
I come from proud France. Have you learned English? Have the English come here? If English works, that's better. It means they've already experienced Europeans. As Francois speaks in English, they whisper among themselves again, and then all nod their heads. Especially the man who just spoke English comes forward first. I, Massasoit. Here, chief. If you're a chief, then you're a king. Wherever we are, we Frenchmen show respect to the rightful monarch established by the Lord. Pleased to meet you. Then, where did you encounter the English? Could you perhaps tell me the location or time? Wait. Massasoit cuts off Francois's words and quietly commands something to the other men beside him with a jerk of his chin. The men then briefly disappear into the bushes and return with something. It was, a crown, a scepter, symbols of royalty shining in pure white. Is it made of silver? Chapter 66. Growing Pains. 2. When show respect. Told to wear. As Massasoit dons the crown and holds the scepter to the ground, it becomes even clearer that he is the ruler of this area. Francois unconsciously bows his head in surprise and whispers to Samuel. European regalia. Ha! What's that? Ah, nothing, Massasoit. Nothing at all. Gift, it is. Massasoit says to the French in still awkward English, but with a much more dignified appearance than before. The French, who were full of wariness toward the savages just moments ago, relax their posture, and reverence enters their voices.
JFT.
Yes. From whom exactly? Raleigh. Walter Raleigh, Baron of Roanoke, the confidant of Queen Elizabeth, the Saint of London, the Lord of Virginia. Francois, who trembled at that name, almost fainted at Massasoit's following words. Gift. From Raleigh's chief. Our EMP. Great chief. They briefly glanced at the crown. The material didn't seem to be of English origin. It looked like silver or platinum, but the texture and color were subtly different. Then there's only one answer. Du. You know where the great chief lives. By sea far, so. Beyond that, don't know. Captain. That looks like aluminum I've only heard about in rumors. New World aluminum. Samuel exclaims in astonishment. My God! The Emperor of the New World actually exists. Slap. Francois lightly hits the back of Samuel's head and says, Talk sense, Samuel. Anyone can see it's about Queen Elizabeth. Is that so? Yes, it is. Eliza. What? Nothing, Massasoit. Besides the man called Baron of Roanoke. I mean, Walter Raleigh. Was there no one else who seemed higher than him? Massasoit shook his head. Then Francois slowly turned to his nephew and said, See, even that chief called Massasoit says he hasn't met anyone other than Walter Raleigh. But the aluminum. Doesn't that English queen nowadays go around jangling with aluminum ornaments? Besides, would a native emperor have any reason to give European regalia to his subjects? That's true. It's not just true. I'm right. If you believe a savage emperor actually exists, Would you also believe the stories about the Saint of London and the angel?
François Gravé du Pont-Is à catholique.
That is, he honestly doesn't believe the story about an angel suddenly appearing in a Protestant country. No, in fact, except for the English, everyone, whether Protestant or Catholic, doesn't really believe it. So, do you believe that an empire of savages, which no explorer from France, Spain, or England had discovered until now, suddenly appeared, poof, just as England established a new colony? It doesn't seem so. Samuel, intimidated by his superior's words, nods with his head down, and François nods in response. François's words were the orthodox view in the European world. A noble Christian savage emperor of the New World? Only superstitious sailors or the English would believe such a story. Countless explorers have traversed North America, and what they discovered there were, at best, some sturdy huts and naked savage chiefs adorned with feathers. But suddenly, as soon as England establishes a colony, a hidden empire reveals itself. Moreover, they possessed superior technology to Europe. They shared resources never seen before with the English without any price. The English from the peace-loving island nation didn't plunder, kill, enslave, or exile them, but operated the colony in harmony. Coincidentally, uneducated women who met an angel there brought a cure for the plague. Above all, believe England? The country that abandoned its faith because the king wanted to remarry a pretty woman? The most untrustworthy country in the world? Nonsense. Only fools would believe England. Even though France and England were allies under the anti-Spanish banner, François couldn't trust them. Isn't that the neighborhood that fills the royal budget with piracy? Moreover, there were plenty of reasons for England to spout such nonsense. It's good propaganda to say they've established a kind colony in contrast to the Spanish exploiting poor natives. It's good for domestic consumption to claim they've allied with a new world Christian monarch, whose existence may or may not be real. It's convenient to say, these aren't blood-stained jewels like Spain's. Our kind native emperor gave them as gifts. Sob when luxury items pop up. Does that so-called native emperor have some jar that infinitely produces precious metals and all sorts of resources to give away so much to the English? Didn't they say they trade? Who knows? Maybe it was genuinely peaceful. Yeah, with bullets. Ahem. At the two men's rapid-fire French, Massasoit, unable to understand anything, frowns.
Ah, sorry, Massasoit.
We had no intention of disrespecting you. Worried that the atmosphere might worsen, François handed him other curious objects like a compass and flint before leaving. He had decided. He came here on royal orders to do preliminary work before establishing a small contact point for luxury item trade. Originally, King Henry IV of France would have forbidden going too far south out of concern for friction with England. But now there are too many fruits in the south to give up. Even if disguised as coincidence, approach the English colony and uncover the identity of that native emperor, and then find other sources of precious aluminum and fur to establish trade with natives. That was his purpose. François, true to European common sense, never for a moment doubted that England's propaganda was false. The native emperor is just a novel written by England's harlot Elizabeth and her male prostitute Walter Raleigh. Who would believe that? Ahem. What's the matter? Baron of Roanoke, Your Excellency? Nothing at all. My ear just itches for some reason. The Emperor of the Natives told me that when your ear itches, someone is speaking ill of you. Ha ha ha. What an amusing imagination. Her Majesty the Queen is waiting. Thus Raleigh, dressed up and doused in perfume, felt something strange as he entered the Queen's bedchamber. Walt, come here. Let's talk a bit more about that amazing ship. My Queen. It was a time when the Queen and her favorite of the most untrustworthy country in the world were enjoying themselves after a long while. Chapter 67. Growing Pains, 3. It became December 1594. Another 3 or 4 tribes have pledged allegiance. Wow, a population growth rate of 100%. Ueda City, where I lived, had a negative population growth rate. Now I have more people under me than the mayor of Ueda. My power surpasses the mayor of Ueda, and the various problems occurring in the settlement have also increased by 100%. Good heavens! Shamans are approaching the church and causing trouble. That's not causing trouble, they're offering sacrifices. Isn't that the same thing? Mantio, isn't there some solution? Since they're all flooding in without converting, it's becoming a headache for Harriet, who was enthusiastically evangelizing. Moreover, as natives who don't speak Algonquian languages are gradually flooding in, problems are increasing even more. Without the angel present, we can't communicate. Good heavens! How does he speak multiple languages simultaneously? Everyone, gather around first. With natives who don't speak the same language crowding into the trading posts and settlements, the Europeans are having serious communication problems. The cultural and linguistic barriers have created daily frustrations and misunderstandings that slow everything down. Even if the natives who have impressively mastered 5 or 6 different tribal languages among themselves are managing just fine, the European traders and settlers who have only recently struggled to learn basic Algonquian phrases now suddenly have to contend with some strange new language from tribes further west. Their exasperation is visible in every interaction. Fortunately, a simplified version of English had gradually spread as a practical trade language among many of the native groups in this particular region. The Pidgin version lacks complexity but serves its essential purpose in commerce. If that linguistic bridge hadn't developed naturally over the past few years, my work as an intermediary would have multiplied several times over, becoming nearly impossible to manage alone. Still, it didn't change the fact that I ended up taking on interpretation duties that weren't in my job description. The workload is insane. Christmas is approaching, but it looks like we won't be able to prepare anything this time. I've returned. If you tell me to set sail again, I absolutely... Walter, thank you for coming back. Here, take this tablet first. What? First, let's tour the western inland area together to check on the newly settled tribes. Countless Excel files have piled up for us to organize together. Unfortunately, I had to put Walter Raleigh to work as soon as he returned from his voyage. In a situation where most English people can't read, how could I let someone who knows how to handle Excel files idle away? Huff, I don't know how many villages we've toured. Walter. Yes, Mr. Nemo. Please wait a moment. This is... Get in. I have to work through the night too. So we drove around in the hijet, shedding tears. From Chesapeake Bay southwest further inland, we moved with excavators, hijets, and all kinds of equipment. We had to clear new land in that area. This rod, gift, man called Raleigh, gift. Kung, bes? This object don't know name, but no, came from south. Raleigh? Given by a man with that name. Great chiefs. Gift. The more south you go, the more fluent the natives' English becomes. Also, the more south you go, the more specific the native stories become. Especially, mentions of Great Chief, Raleigh, and Nemo increase. Nemo, meaning nobody? A curious name. So are we heading further south from here?
No.
From here on is the territory of the Akahenok tribe. It's only a few dozen kilometers from the Virginia colony. If we go by ship from here, it could be considered an invasion of foreign territory. Francois Grave Dupont shakes his head in response to Samuel's question. So we'll dock the ship here and split the party. I and a couple of explorers will approach Raleigh's Virginia colony somehow from this area, whether by land route or whatever. The rest will wait at the docked ship. Francois's plan was simple. From here, take a boat to cruise around Chesapeake Bay looking for sources of aluminum and fur. While doing so, check the rumors about the native emperor and their truth. If they happen to reach the Virginia colony, immediately examine the colony carefully and leave. But where is everyone moving to? To the Great Chief's land. Everyone is starving, and there is food there. See, can we go together? If you can paddle an oar. things accelerated several times faster. After meeting and trading with someone who seemed to be a tribal chief, Francois immediately boarded a canoe with his men. As Francois jumped up and down with excitement, Samuel asked, "Captain, does truly a savage emperor actually exist? Everyone's talking about the great chief, and now we even see crowds moving toward that great chief, don't we?" To his nephew Samuel's foolish words, Francois just smiled and replied, "No, rather more things became certain. Don't be stupid, Samuel. We haven't seen any traces of advanced civilization, but the name of the great chief is widely spread. Doesn't it seem like the English are playing some nasty trick? Yes, that must be it. What did the English say? Didn't they boast that a great savage empire, as advanced as Europe or even more so in some aspects, had become their ally? But we haven't found any trace of civilization, let alone a great civilization more advanced than Europe, except for a few gifts. Even after coming right up to the Virginia colony. It's definitely the English setting up a chief in this area and showing off. I'm finally going to catch them in the act. Is that so? Then why are hundreds of people moving that way? Don't you understand? They already know that we've come." As Samuel tilted his head, seemingly unconvinced, Francois said, "Since they know we've come, they're desperately gathering people around to at least make a show of a great empire? Trying to hide their vices from the Christian world somehow. Are you afraid of me, Francois Grave Dupont? England? Walter Raleigh? Huh? Ha 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 ha. That's why they're all moving so urgently, right? Now we've caught England's tail. From now on, once we find a tribe to trade aluminum and fur with and establish a trading post, we too can plant the French flag in this America." Chapter 68. Growing Pains. 4. No. Could they have noticed our arrival so quickly? Even if news traveled from the north, it would take several weeks by sea. So do you believe England? Or me? The captain, of course. As Samuel seemed persuaded again and nodded his head, Francois resumed paddling, inhaling the salty sea breeze of Chesapeake Bay. Thus, breaking through the rough waters, hundreds of people soon land. We've arrived. Reached their destination. As Francois looked up, he saw dozens of European-style huts lined up along the coast. They were all characterized by white outer walls with green-painted gabled roofs. People marveled at the neatly arranged sight, and even Francois couldn't hold back his exclamation at this moment. The English colonization seems more successful than expected. Arrived here. A stiff and foreign English pronunciation is heard from beside him. It was the words of the chief who had guided them here. As he said, soon the hull of the canoe gently touches the sandy beach, and people begin to disembark one by one. Francois rubs his hands together and steps onto the shore of Chesapeake. Now, the plan is to naturally blend into the crowd and, when this emperor or great chief appears, strike up a conversation. Let's see how long the myth of a native emperor fluent in Latin and English and faithful to Christianity can last. Soon, Francois Grave Dupont will decipher all of England's intentions and be able to present a powerful diplomatic weapon to His Majesty the King. It was while thinking this and mingling among those gathered on the shore. There. Everyone gather here. A woman's call is heard. Turning his head, he sees a woman in her 20s calling people together. The tribe members who had just come with him rush over. Tell me your name, age, and family relationship briefly here before you go. Gather over here. Over here. Other English people seem to be guides, standing to assist the woman from earlier, lining people up. Anyway, the expedition members who inadvertently lined up following the tribe members wait their turn and eventually stand before the woman. Your name is... Ha! And the woman looks at Francois and the other expedition members and blinks her eyes, as if she doesn't understand what's going on. To her, Francois bowed gently and opened his mouth. Hello. I am. You're European? Why are you here? Did you guide the Akahanok tribe here? Then you should all go carry timber now. The young woman in front of him suddenly interrupts.
No.
Why are you just standing there? Move quickly. Ahem. There seems to be some misunderstanding. She's giving orders? Francois's brow twitches for a moment. Why are you just? There seems to be some misunderstanding. What? Who are you? The governor's wife? I seek rest and proper treatment. Only then does the woman's eyes widen, hearing the English with an unfamiliar accent. At the woman's reaction, nearby English people gather, saying, Mrs. Dare. What's the matter? Lady Eleanor. The woman called Eleanor tilts her head and says, I'm not the governor's wife. Aren't you our settler? I am French, and I seek rest. You don't seem to be of a status worthy of respect, but I would like to be brought to someone of proper status. Suddenly, the atmosphere turns hostile, but Francois, already displeased, lightly ignored such a slightly unpleasant atmosphere. What's this? Why is everyone like this? Is there no proper person in charge other than this woman? Captain, I think it would be better to stay quiet for now. Samuel? What's wrong with you? These English people seem to lack manners. Didn't I say I'm a guest from abroad? Other than this rude woman who suddenly gives orders to my face. Someone else. Why is everyone acting this way? Haha. Is this woman some kind of saint? Why are your expressions suddenly so hostile? Stop. I am an explorer with the permission of the King of France. Assaulting me would be an insult to the authority of the King of France. Stop. Stop. I said stop, damn. Equals. I really stayed up for several nights. At one point, while traveling on a poorly cleared road, the hijet almost flipped over. Only after all kinds of hardships could Walter and I return to Chesapeake in the hijet. What a struggle. Kyra. Stop. Everyone. Calm down. That sounds like Eleanor's voice? What's with the sudden commotion? Naturally, in a neighborhood where about 10,000 people live, if a conflict arises, it all becomes my responsibility. If dozens of people gather, shouting and jumping, of course I need to pay attention. Walter. Let's run. Got it. After parking the hijet and running with Walter Raleigh, people soon see us and split to both sides. Then I saw Eleanor, who had fallen to her knees screaming, and 4 men who were bloodied. What is this? As Raleigh shouts in confusion, other people around Eleanor walk over to us, huffing, and report the situation. Those guys dared to be disrespectful to the Holy Lady. Clearly, that guy was calling the Holy Lady a rude woman and whatnot. They were also saying something about being French. So thinking they were even more arrogant because of that, we completely broke their noses. Don't worry. It's not serious enough to cause major injury, just enough to make them unable to regain consciousness. What? As I looked down at them in confusion, they were indeed collapsed, trembling, and falling unconscious. Completely figured it out. Englishman, did you think it wasn't enough to deceive by distributing gifts to nearby savages and gathering nearby savages together? First, beat people up, establish dominance, and then start the conversation. It's such a shallow tactic that it's been completely figured out in my mind. Thinking that, Francois Grave Dupont smiled with satisfaction. His lip was split. Anyway, attempts to hide the secrets of the settlement and regain control of the situation while draining his energy. All figured out. Francois fainted with a smile on his face. Chapter 69. Growing Pains. 5. Walter, please step aside for a moment. Yes. Eleanor, please hurry a bit. Where was the painkiller? It's here. Thank you. This place is a hospital. Since Margaret was sent to London to establish a clinic for the poor in Southwark, others have been taking turns playing doctor. Let me briefly summarize the situation. First, The English people, unable to tolerate the Saint Eleanor being insulted, beat up those self-proclaimed French explorers. Then the natives urgently intervened, asking why people were being beaten to death, and we managed to move them here. Ugh, ugh, cough, hic, hiccup. All four are unconscious, and fortunately, there don't appear to be any serious external injuries, at least for now. What if one of them has serious internal injuries? What if they die? A foreign expedition dying in our community? Wouldn't that be a problem? Are you all right? I don't think I am. But thank you for asking, Eleanor. Phew. I was stunned after suddenly being hit with an unexpected variable. Let me gather my thoughts first. Suddenly, a French expedition came here. There was certainly no such content in the game catalog. That could mean these people weren't important in the original history. Or, the existence of this expedition itself might never have happened in the original history. Somehow, I think it's the latter. No, all the names and routes of expeditions sent by 16th century England, Spain, France, etc. were definitely listed in the game catalog. Which means, is it because of the butterfly effect? What did I do? Come to think of it, I saved a failed colony, converted Walter Raleigh, created a new sect, treated the London plague, and distributed aluminum, fruit, and various luxury goods to England. I've done a lot. I was able to quickly understand. Unlike a book transmigration protagonist who monopolizes all the opportunities and then says things like, "Strange, the growth of the main character's party is too slow. Given what I've done so far, butterfly effects are more than plausible. The likelihood that France would set its sights on the New World earlier than in the original history after seeing the fruits I had sown was more than sufficient. Right? I've roughly grasped the situation. Now the question remains, so what will you do now? Should I just convert them too? No. With Walter Raleigh, the opportunity was right, and I had plenty of time and resources to invest in converting just one Raleigh. Not now. Thanks to the population explosion, there's nothing I can do immediately. What could I do for them anyway? Should I make prophecies like I did with Raleigh? But having altered history so much, what if I make some clumsy prophecy and it turns out wrong? I also question whether there's any benefit to enticing them. Raleigh was the Queen's favorite, but these people, aren't they just explorers? Moreover, France is in the midst of civil war, and I don't even know which faction these explorers serve. I decline investments that might fail after putting in all that effort. For now, avoiding them seems to be the best strategy. Walter, I've hidden the hijet, so I'll be leaving now. I'll leave their reception and surveillance to you. Understood. So I left the hospital. As soon as I walked out, I heard screams erupting behind me, suggesting they had woken up. I've delegated to Raleigh, so I won't worry about it anymore. I already have plenty to do and am busy. After a few days, Francois recovered. His slightly dislocated jaw returned to normal, and the bruises on his beaten nose and swollen face gradually subsided. Still, remembering the beating he took, he cautiously wandered around the lodging area, until he eventually overcame the trauma and was able to examine various parts of the settlement under the guidance and surveillance of the English. So, you're saying the population here has only recently increased this much? Yes, originally about 10,000 people lived here, but suddenly within a few months, natives started pouring in, and now it's doubled. Ah, interesting. His eyes only caught the vulnerabilities of this settlement. Although dozens of houses were lined up in rows, most of the gathered population had no place to stay and had settled in tents or the flimsy huts typical of savages. There also didn't seem to be proper fields for farming, as most of the population appeared to be surviving day by planting crops densely in narrowly divided plots. The situation of this settlement, which had forcibly increased its population recently, was apparent to anyone. Had they arrived a few months later, the splendor of this fake empire, with its tens of thousands of inhabitants, might have been more evident. But it was too late, as he had already arrived. That wasn't all. Swarming. Excuse me, what's happening there? Ah, it seems more tribes are pledging allegiance. They're offering treasures? Voluntarily, yes. Natives bringing suspiciously large amounts of treasures to submit themselves, and it's voluntary? Nonsense. Whether he couldn't properly investigate because he was confined here, it was clear that the English were continuing their conquest. Or they might be using food as a weapon during the famine. Forced migration, plunder, and conquest. Watching these three things happening simultaneously, things the English claimed they never did, Francois couldn't help but smile bitterly. Is this their peaceful civilization? Is this their moral evangelization? Wait, you cannot go outside today. What's the matter? You just can't. Above all, occasionally the English would arbitrarily confine them to their lodgings. And a few days later, when they came out, strange things would have happened. Tens of acres of forest would have disappeared, or tens of acres of new fields would have been plowed. It was clear. Forced labor. It was evident they were enslaving the natives and working them harshly. Otherwise, it would be impossible to clear such vast forests and develop wildlands in such a short time. Francois finally concluded, "My nephew, I think we've gathered enough information. We can leave now." To which Samuel replied, "What? But there's still so much to see." More to see? Chapter 70. Growing Pains. 6. What more is there to see? Native slaves in chains.
No.
Have you ever seen potatoes like these, Captain? They're much tastier than those known in Europe, and the tubers are larger. And the chickens are so fat and big. Samuel spoke excitedly. The agricultural technology of these savages, natives, seems to have developed amazingly. Their tool called a homie, and everything else is remarkable. Francois, holding his head at Samuel's foolish remarks, said, "My boy." "Yes, Captain. What do you think about these amazing things?" "Think about it." It's a question even a child could answer. Why would tribes with advanced agricultural technology not farm but wander around relying on hunting and gathering? Pardon? If their agricultural technology is so great, why can't they settle somewhere instead of continuing their nomadic lifestyle? Well, yes, their chickens might be larger and potatoes tastier, but there might be issues like poor yields. But the food seems too abundant for that. They probably imported it from England. Are you saying only the potatoes here in America are delicious, and only the chickens here are big and fat? Were chickens even native to the New World in the first place? It would be more realistic to say they fell from the sky. After perfectly refuting his foolish nephew's opinion, Francois rose again. The savages here are just savages. Pitiful savages exploited by England at that. Now, let's prepare to leave. But what about the Emperor's authority? All the people here seem to hold great reverence for the Emperor. Everyone was saying they owe their livelihood to the great chief. If the Emperor has secured this level of authority and loyalty, it implies there's an organized government. You're saying the Emperor has such great authority? The chiefs here can fall from power at the slightest issue. And isn't saying they owe their livelihood to the Emperor a kind of primitive religious notion? Even ignorant peasants believe in the king's healing touch. Think about it, my boy. They owe their livelihood to the Emperor? Unless the Emperor descended from heaven and threw down potatoes and whatnot, how does that make sense? Unless the Emperor personally plows hundreds of acres of land, how does that make sense? It's all ridiculous superstition. Above all, if they were so civilized, they wouldn't have been so helplessly dominated by the English. They don't seem to be dominated as such. And if their agricultural technology isn't advanced, how do you explain those sweet grapes? They were naturally sweet. If they're being unilaterally and helplessly exploited, why are they giving gifts and pledging allegiance? The English must have threatened them with force, or enticed them with food during the famine. There's a drought, isn't there? If not that, then perhaps food is so abundant that they're just giving gifts to neighbors. But how could food be abundant in a newly established colony? It seemed there would be no end to this argument. As they glared at each other and continued their debate, they realized the other two people weren't with them and looked around. The other two were pressed against the window of the lodging, looking outside. "What are you two doing?" "HM? Watching the native emperor." "What?" "The emperor. A being they had never been properly shown." "How do you know what you're seeing is the emperor?" "It's obvious when you see him. Would you like to look?" As soon as they heard those words, Francois and Samuel rushed to the window to watch the crowd visible as dots in the distance. A group of mixed English and local savages surrounded one man, and that man was easily noticeable because he was a head taller than everyone else. Everyone was kneeling before him or carefully bowing their heads. Even the English. Among them, Baron Raleigh was assisting him like a courtier. The two men fell silent. You shouldn't be looking outside right now." Soon, the English who were monitoring them approached from outside and closed the window. But the scene they had just witnessed was unforgettable. Even though they saw it from a great distance, they could sense that the gaze of people looking at him was extraordinary. "Captain, I think I need to revise what I said earlier. What we just saw wasn't reverence, but rather loved." He was loved. Francois and Samuel quickly pulled out notebooks and pens from their pockets and began scribbling various notes. It was a report they would write for His Majesty the King. The day after writing that report, they left the English colony. It was the most bizarre experience of their lives. To the great King who rules the great France with God's blessing. I hereby declare that there shall be not a single falsehood in what I am about to report, and that all of this content is not information heard from others, but what I have directly seen and heard. Reviewing the above, the English colony seems to be operated in a completely different way from their propaganda, clearly in an inhumane and immoral manner. Also, the reality of their colony and the so-called native empire was very shabby and not worth paying attention to. However, if there is one thing that deserves careful observation, it is the identity of that native emperor the English presented. The loyalty and respect of the residents, including even the English, toward him seemed deeper than any love I know that a good monarch receives from his people. Also, their faith in him appeared like that of a devout Christian serving his Savior. From this, I infer that the identity of the so-called emperor is likely the spiritual pillar of the natives, or a symbolic monarch. While he may not have substantive ruling power, it was clear that his presence and leadership were strongly captivating the natives and the English settlers. Considering these factors, if France were to establish colonies there, evangelize the natives, and obtain American resources, Your Majesty's greatness would be further enhanced. Your faithful servant, Francois Grave. Chapter 71. Contrasting Reports. 1. A man was reading 2 letters in front of a burning fireplace. Reports from across the sea, written by an uncle and his nephew. The level of technology handled by the natives was very crude, greatly differing from the English claims. If Your Majesty were to see these naked people, you would inevitably think of the word barbarism. Also, this was the content of the report sent by Uncle Francois Grave. We cannot dismiss their level of civilization. Each tool they used was incredibly sophisticated and contained many technical considerations. Their fruits were large and sweet, and their livestock were fat. Anyone who sees barbarism here is a fool. Moreover, this was an excerpt from the report of his nephew, Samuel de Champlain. The 2 reports contained eerily opposite content. Everything was a vile fabrication by the English. They either co-opted or detained the so-called emperor of the savages to create a fake empire and exploit the local savages. Here it says this: there was a strong bond visible between the savages and the English. When I called the local Indian savages to the English here, they became very angry and corrected me with the term natives. The natives here send luxurious gifts to the English. There it says that. These were conclusions drawn from observing the same place at the same time. Could one of them be false? That couldn't be. There was no reason for it. Then there is only one conclusion. Both reports contain the sincere observations of their authors, each examining different sides of the same coin. Even so, such contrasting reactions. And there was something even more interesting than these contrasting reactions. To the so-called native emperor that the English have, to the spiritual leader guiding the natives here. There is definitely something. Something was glimpsed. They overlap in that one section. There is a monarch whom natives and English with different religions simultaneously respect and admire. While their opinions diverged on whether he had real power or was Baron Raleigh's puppet, they at least agreed that he exerted some powerful influence. Enviable. For Henry IV, the legitimate and rightful monarch of France, this was enviable content. Just recently, he had barely begun to resolve this country's religious conflicts. However, the war between him and his enemies was not yet over. He was still excommunicated by the Pope of Rome. That was natural. He had been a Protestant until 2 years ago. Now he was a Catholic excommunicated by the Catholic Church. Anyway, the religious wars in France that had continued for the past 30 years were finally heading toward their end. It was his second year since entering Paris. His enemies would be destroyed, and he would triumph. But the war had lasted 30 years. Catholics, Royalists, Protestants, all had amicably borrowed every debt in the world and still lacked money. Even he himself was in a chokehold by England's Queen Elizabeth. Besides that, there were numerous debts to be repaid. That wasn't all. On the brink, the kingdom was devastated, and royal authority was more vulnerable than ever. Great lords who sought to diminish royal authority or even covet the throne itself were everywhere. Potential traitors who couldn't be trusted, who had been pointing guns and swords at each other until just moments ago, were sharpening their blades from all sides. To survive, to restore royal authority, money was needed. And not just any money, but a new source of funds that could be used without any burden. The money had to come from outside. He couldn't risk taking on more debt from anyone at home or abroad. Gold, silver, and luxury goods were needed. He needed massive luxury goods enough to extract money from the upper class of the country at any time. A source of funds was needed. A source of funds to establish an army solely for the king, an organization of officials solely for the king. A source of funds for royal authority. He wanted an alliance that gushed aluminum and fur, just like Elizabeth had. He desperately wanted but it's probably an achievement I can't accomplish within my lifetime. However, for now, he must refrain from actions that could provoke England, his ally. Henry de Bourbon, the monarch of France, sighs and looks at the map of America placed on the side table. He wouldn't extend his sphere of influence beyond a certain point. To avoid provoking England, it would be better to establish just a few trading posts with about a dozen people stationed. According to the explorers, the fur trade up there didn't look bad, so that should be just right. Someday, he too would swagger like England's Elizabeth. But not now. Henry IV, suppressing the great sense of interest rising in his chest, carefully folded the 2 letters and put them in a drawer. And he didn't forget. There might be a wealthy and powerful monarch across the Atlantic. A potential ally who could help place the French monarchy on solid ground. It seemed as if he was beckoning to me. Huff, pant. WEV finished registering 400 people. Now just head over there to complete the land register. I was happy at Hewitt's words, but then I wasn't. This is insane. I've been working for 7 hours straight without a break. And it's still not done? This is all because of those French people. They came uninvited, wandered around meddling everywhere, and disrupted work, causing already delayed tasks to pile up even more, and more. I won't forget this grudge. Are you all right? No. I'm fine, Mr. Hewitt. So where do I need to go now? To the Western Settlement, where the Akahanok and Accomack tribes have newly settled. So after 14 hours of labor today, I collapsed onto my bed and fell asleep. The next day I worked for 13 hours. The day after that was 15 hours, and the day after that was 12 hours. Is this even life? It's strange. Other people who know how to work with Excel don't suffer this much. Why is all the work falling on me? Let me quickly summarize my daily routine. After Excel work, I push land with an excavator, break rocks, cut trees with a chainsaw, plow fields with a cultivator, and manage household consumables. That includes supervising other people working with Excel to make sure they're doing it properly. Wow! One person doing office work, production work, and management all at once. I see the problem. There are too many tasks that only I can do. Today, too, completely exhausted, I lay on my bed. The only difference from other days was that I only worked about 12 hours. Thanks to that, instead of immediately passing out, I could think before sleeping. Only I can handle the cultivator. Only I can drive the hijet and forklift, the chainsaw, mixer, pesticide sprayer. Everything stops without me. And now the settlement's population has increased by more than 70,000% in 7 years from the original 30 people. Our settlement's population now exceeds 20,000. But the way it operates is exactly the same as before. I just keep working, and working more. This isn't right. I need to find a solution like I did with Excel. For example, teaching others how to use certain equipment. Yes, that's it. Chapter 72. Contrasting reports. 2. Struck by this brilliant idea, I sat up without realizing it. For instance, isn't it better to recruit 3 or 4 people to operate a cultivator for 15 or 16 hours a day, rather than me alone operating it for 2 or 3 hours before moving on to other tasks? Meanwhile, someone operates the chainsaw, someone drives the hijet, someone sprays pesticides. Wouldn't that be perfect? We've already built boats and greenhouses with plastic. There's no need for me to carry all these various tools alone while saying, I must hide that these are modern items. By passing on these various technologies to some trustworthy people, not only will productivity increase tenfold, but my work-life balance will also be restored. Barely suppressing my excitement, I began organizing this genius idea in my notebook. Yes, let's start slowly. Beginning with the easiest to teach, the least strenuous, the safest, equals. This is what we call a chainsaw. Yes, I started with the hardest to teach and the most dangerous. The reason was absurd. It was because logging with a chainsaw was the most exhausting work. I, too, want to be free from hard labor. Ooh, chainsaw. That's right, Oitoten. The guy in front of me right now is not at all trustworthy. But at least he has a position and a name. Not a bad condition for entrusting a tool of the angel. I took Oitoten and several other chainsaw user candidates to a nearby forest. Oitoten, take it.
Yes.
Perhaps due to the tension of possibly handling an angel's tool soon, sweat was pouring down Oitoten's face. I patted his shoulders to help him relax before handing him the chainsaw. Now, what did I tell you? Here, touch this to start the engine, and the ignition is done by touching here. Wait, you need to engage the brake first. Ah, SK, this feels unsafe. Still, I've trained him day and night for several days, so it should be fine. After giving Oitoten one last word of encouragement, I said, as I mentioned with the chainsaw, instead of extending your arms to work, always keep it close to your body and apply force.
Ah, understood.
I'll do exactly that. Whir. Good. At least the engine started safely. It's just trimming some tree branches. I gave thorough safety training so no one should get hurt. You shouldn't work with the tip of the blade. Clang. Kickback. When the chainsaw guide bar suddenly jumps up. Fortunately, Oitoten wasn't hurt. That's because Oitoten instantly dropped the saw due to its recoil. That doesn't mean everyone was safe, though. A chainsaw blade can rotate at speeds up to 20 meters per second. The saw that flew off with that and the flying chainsaw, Ayakak, pull it out. The chainsaw is lodged in Nemo's shoulder. Oh my goodness. Ended up like that. Alright, I've definitely learned one thing. Never, ever put potentially lethal equipment in the hands of beginners. In this era, there's no YouTube, no systematic teaching materials, no proper teachers, and no academies to provide all those things. In other words, people have to learn by instinct. I can learn by instinct. I have unlimited lives. But others don't. This isn't some fugu sashimi recipe, We don't need safety precautions for heavy machinery that are perfected as people die. I'd rather handle all these potential murder weapons by myself, even if it's exhausting. Hijet, chainsaw, excavator, forklift, weed trimmer. Only after thoroughly listing these potential murder weapons could I finally grasp the situation. So that's why they say not to make enemies with your neighbors in rural areas. Anyway, pesticide sprayer, fertilizer spreader, pesticide mixer, cultivator, crop duster, water pump, others, excluding me, should only handle these relatively safe items. That isn't limited to just the simple use of farm equipment. Are you all right? Nemo, your arm flew off.
your arm.
First support Nemo and quickly collect his arm too. I felt this before when I asked blacksmiths to replicate a two-stroke weed trimmer engine for field clearing. The technology of the 20th and 21st centuries wasn't something that could be replicated with the crude handcrafting skills from before the Industrial Revolution. A 20th century tin can surpass everything about the most sophisticated machines of the 16th century. I'm never going to try replicating dangerous technology with 16th century blacksmiths again, especially anything with explosion potential. When the engine exploded, I nearly died. Whoever it is, I'll make sure they only handle safe technology. Otherwise, I'm not human. Mr. White, watch carefully from now on. I'll show you how to use a cultivator. You can determine forward and reverse with this gear here. Forward. Reverse. Of course, now I'll only entrust these safe technologies to truly trustworthy people. I don't know yet, but who knows if there's a way to kill someone even with a pesticide mixer. The killer I saw in a movie once killed 3 men with just a pencil. Anyway, seeing John White quickly become proficient with the cultivator makes me feel proud. Before gripping the cultivator handle, White even made the sign of the cross while mumbling some Bible verse. Indeed, there's one more reason why I should entrust this equipment only to trustworthy people. Power. In this world, I'm the only one who has these things, and I'm the only one who knows how to use them, so handling modern equipment might look like some heavenly power to people. In such a situation, carelessly giving authority to someone ignorant could lead to unpredictable consequences. It's best to entrust it to someone trustworthy who won't cause accidents in the long run. Yes, I should create something like a certification system. Since I won't be recruiting many people anyway, they can take an exam in front of me, and I'll directly conduct a ceremony to confer qualifications. Like appointing master craftsman. What should I call this? Agricultural machine technician? But that's for people who make and repair agricultural machinery. Similar to heavy equipment operator. That's it. Watching people respond with tears and applause as White operates the cultivator. I say to White, congratulations. You've now taken your first step as an agricultural equipment operator. Pardon? Did you say, ahem, surgeon, operator? Huh? The high-performance language patch made by Fansuka Software immediately gives my intuition a signal that something is wrong. The word operator, referring to a technician, only has the meaning of a surgeon right now. In other words, I need to give White some kind of title here. What should I call it? Something appropriately authoritative. Something familiar to people of this era. Something that looks like it's engaged in professional work. I've got it. I meant Knight of Agricultural Equipment. Pardon. Knight. And so began the first investiture ceremony for an agricultural equipment knight in the New World. Chapter 73. Delegating Authority, 1. Despite the grand name, Agricultural Equipment Knight Investiture Ceremony, it wasn't much. Mr. White, will you diligently follow the safety guidelines I've taught you? Yes, of course. Good. Let's work hard. And that was it. Well, it's not like we needed to hold a sword, tap shoulders, kneel in a grand cathedral and make declarations. Is that how you get a heavy equipment operator's license? I've never seen that. Anyway, after teaching White various safety guidelines and instructing him on the maintenance and use of cultivators and related equipment, the insignificant ceremony ended. I will work hard. But strangely, White's eyes were getting red. I wondered why, but then I saw Walter Raleigh wiping tears next to White and realized, a knight is nobility. Come to think of it, Raleigh himself was originally a commoner who earned his knighthood and baronetcy after tremendous struggles. I quickly added to White, this isn't a hereditary title or anything. Think of it more like a license. Still, it's an honor. You saved my daughter, and now you give me this honor. I will live a life dedicated to serving and obeying you. This reaction is quite different from what I expected. I just hoped no problems would arise. The next day, I took White and others to my farm in Crotone for urgent training. Although I happened to invest the first night, from now on, agricultural equipment knights will be selected through rigorous training and verification processes. It will not be hereditary, and I will bestow this honor only to those who are qualified. Ooh-hoo.
Understood.
That's amazing. Something still feels off. Did I make the name too grandiose? No. Since I've been the only one operating farm machinery until now, in a way I'm sharing power, so it's actually right to be thorough and confer authority. Of course, I still won't teach them how to use potentially lethal weapons like the hijet or weed trimmer. Here, my most common tasks are plowing fields, cutting trees, spraying pesticides for pest control, and spreading fertilizer. If I carelessly teach someone these methods and they cause an accident, my authority will diminish. And if my authority falls here, this community will collapse. And if this community collapses, my daily life ends too. This community is maintained by my authority and resources, and my daily life is maintained by this community's loyalty and reverence. Agricultural equipment knights shouldn't be taken lightly. Even in 21st century Japan, heavy equipment operators have high daily wages and are difficult to become without connections. Anyway, I've gotten off track. From now on, I'll explain how to use the fertilizer spreader and its precautions. It will smell, so work with masks on. At that, Eleanor Dare, John White, and about 30 other people gathered here put on their masks and hurriedly lifted fertilizer bags. Oh dear, working with their backs like that will destroy their discs. First, everyone open these fertilizer bags and pour them in. Then we'll take it to the vineyard. Understood. And so the work began, and naturally, with helping hands, it was completed faster than usual. Or not. Don't pull it that way. Keep it straight. I told you, controlling the pressure is crucial when spraying pesticides. Be careful with the sprayer. If you use pressure above 40, it strains the sprayer. Always make sure the ball valve is fully closed before setting the pressure and using it. Teaching while working took 2 to 3 times longer than usual, even with a dozen people. Still, the fortunate thing was that even if something broke, it would be fixed a day later. Statements like, to use this for a long time, don't use it like this. Or, if you use this for several days straight, it will definitely break, didn't apply to us. Other processes like cleaning, tightening, oiling, and maintenance were also unnecessary. Even if we used it recklessly today as if we were going to throw it away, it would be fully restored tomorrow. So there were only 2 things to teach them. So, hold this valve while looking at this gauge.
Simple usage instruction.
Obviously, when using this, never point it at a person. Understand. Safety guidelines. There was no need to teach management, storage, or disposal methods. As a result, although it took a while for them to become proficient, they could all soon roughly imitate me to some extent. Then the next day and the day after that. Eleanor, take the cultivator. Will, you left the water pump over here. Mr. Bennett, over here. Come help carry some fertilizer. It became easier. Now I didn't need to work all night alone to manage the vineyard. Nor did I have to frantically plow thousands or tens of thousands of square meters of fields by myself. The sprayer dial doesn't indicate the pressure being sprayed. Always close the ball valve, set the pressure, and then spray. Always refuel the water pump outdoors. Don't fill the fuel too full. And also, after about a month, everyone could clumsily imitate me, and whenever they used farm equipment, they recited the safety guidelines I had told them like scriptures, staying completely alert. After about 2 months, the awkwardness in their posture gradually disappeared, and I would immediately tell them and correct them if they made any mistakes or did something wrong while I was closely checking. After about 3 months, everyone could now proceed with work on their own. Yes, now things seem to be running properly. What is this? A valve. Then what is this? That's, not that important. Ah, it's truly amazing. I never even thought such intricate machines could exist before. Of course, Bacon would occasionally throw questions at everything like a 3-year-old toddler. Even Virginia, now 7 years old, doesn't ask this many questions. Doesn't this part seem to prevent backflow?
Yes, Thomas.
Excellent reasoning. Look, Nemo is passing by. Let's ask him if your reasoning is correct. Moreover, Bacon had somehow disassembled all the machine parts and was discussing with Harriet what this and that was, then asking me if they were right. I don't know either. Who memorizes every single part when using equipment? Haha. I want you to figure it out yourselves. That's how you grow. Aya. As expected. Anyway, at times like this, I could skillfully evade by saying things like, self-study like a professor who didn't want to prepare for class. That's how. The 1st Agricultural Equipment Night Brigade, consisting of 32 members, was invested. Everyone, applause. Whoa! Thank you for your hard work. Again, nothing grand, just a simple dinner and applause to finish. I handed out certificate forms hastily made with a printer, clearly stated that no one without one could touch farm equipment, and wrapped everything up. And the next day, I lifted the chainsaw, savoring the beautiful feeling. The effort going into farming was reduced to a quarter. Plowing fields, preparing pesticides, spraying pesticides, and various other tasks were resolved. For example, with many people knowing how to handle water pumps, filling in the small wetlands of Chesapeake Bay became easy. Of course, there was originally only one water pump and there were wetlands everywhere, so it's largely thanks to simply replicating various parts to make improvised stovecom water pumps. By replicating farm tools in this way and increasing the number of people who know how to use them, work would become even easier. Now, I could sleep 8 hours a day. I could play games every day instead of just a day or two every couple of months. Quality of life had returned. Chapter 74. Delegating Authority, 2. Now we can export wheat to England too. Finally, we can help with England's food shortage. Walter, bring some spices and sugar this time. It would be nice if we could make jam with the extra grapes. Of course, I'll bring enough sugar to build mountains. Harvests also increased. I should have done this earlier. Of course, there are still various problems remaining. The population is constantly growing, and the arable land that needs to be reclaimed and forests that need to be cleared are rapidly increasing. But there are limits to what can be done with just one cultivator, one excavator, and chainsaws. Well, those are problems to solve later. Anyway, the urgent issues were mostly resolved, and harvest season had arrived, so it was time for other tasks. Walter, the freshness of the grapes is of utmost importance. Can you reach England within a month? Of course. If you make it, you have to sell it. I'd like to be self-sufficient in most things, but there's still too much we lack in our settlement. From residents' clothing to muskets and various equipment for hunting wildlife, to tools for blacksmiths and various craftsmen. We cannot stop trading with England, even to secure such things. We load up grapes packed in styrofoam boxes, and next to them, wine that has been aged for 2 to 3 years. Sending wine without fortification across the Atlantic. What a remarkable achievement. Naturally, just as White originally planned to grow food crops to sell to England, we also load wheat and potatoes. Finally, jewelry made by our settlement's precious metal and gemstone craftsmen, with the aluminum and various gemstones I provided, are carefully wrapped in cloth. The ship departed, loaded with various medicines to be delivered to Margaret as well. Across the Atlantic to England. Knock, knock, knock. Saint? Saint. It's time to wake up. Is it 6 o'clock already? As Saint Margaret Lawrence says this and opens her eyes, bells ring in the distance. It is indeed 6 o'clock sharp. As she rubs her eyes and gets up, Maids immediately surround her in her nightgown, changing her clothes and grooming her. They had adamantly refused when she originally said she would do it herself, and that's how it turned out. Margaret had realized over the past 2 or 3 years that further argument was futile, so she didn't try to stop them. That's how. A court dress, still unfamiliar to a woman from the slums who had no family, is placed on her body. Margaret steps out the door, walking awkwardly. Where is Her Majesty? She has already risen, completed morning worship and breakfast. We're just waiting for the saint to arrive. Thank you. Receiving care from the maids who came with her when she moved to Whitehall Palace, Margaret stands before the door to the Queen's chambers. Soon the door opens and the Queen, wearing a wooden corset and a black and white dress, was waiting for her. Maids were moving around, dabbing her cheeks and neck with sponges covered in something called foundation and concealer. Originally, the Queen used whitening cosmetics mixed with lead and vinegar, but when Nemo heard about it, his face literally turned white, and he brought these new cosmetics. They mix moisturizer and foundation for the dry parts of her skin, then dab a mixture of pearl and blusher on her cheeks and forehead. Then, after applying various cosmetics matched to the Queen's personal color, the complexion of the woman in her 60s brightens like magic. Elizabeth, seemingly gaining confidence from the mirror, turns to Margaret with a happy face and says, "Today, you're a bit late."
Ah, I'm sorry.
"I'm not scolding you, come here. My teeth have been hurting lately. Have you been brushing your teeth? After every meal. And toothpaste. The taste is unfamiliar. That won't do. You must use it." After prescribing mild painkillers, drugs with exotic names like ibuprofen **** and Tylenol, and various supplements to the Queen who suffers from toothaches due to her love of sweets, Margaret changes from her dress into comfortable work clothes and steps out. Soldiers guarding the palace immediately surround her carriage. As Margaret leaves the palace, citizens who were always waiting send her cheers and gestures. Her destination is Southwark, London's largest area where pleasure districts and slums mix. Originally, filth filled every street, but thanks to Baron Raleigh mobilizing even the royal guards to clean slums all over London, the hygiene conditions had improved greatly. As she reaches the clinic near the docks, her day finally begins in earnest. "Arg! I feel like I'm dying. This doesn't seem like the plague?" Disinfect the wound area and apply ointment around it. The clinic, now treating various diseases besides the plague, had become more complex and busy even though the number of patients had decreased. Only after Margaret sweated profusely all morning did the line of patients disappear, giving her some respite. But Margaret's rest would only come after evening. The soup kitchen is open. Queue quickly. Get in line. This was because the free soup kitchen that had been operating recently opened after lunch. The principle was that 1/10 of the profits from England would be used to operate clinics and soup kitchens like this. Today's menu was again soup with potatoes and onions. Volunteers were carrying and peeling potatoes brought by Baron Raleigh, who had recently returned to London, while others were busy boiling soup and serving. "Miss Lawrence." "Baron? When did you arrive? I've been peeling potatoes right next to you for 47 minutes. Didn't you notice?" "I guess not." Margaret was so busy that she didn't even notice Baron Raleigh approaching. Raleigh puts down the potato peeling knife and says to her, "So, not coming today either?" He was talking about the banquet at his mansion. Margaret shook her head and said, I may be staying at the palace, but I still don't think such a fancy place suits me. If you came, there would be more people at the banquet who would pledge donations just because of the mood. TSK, that's unfortunate."
I'm sorry.
No, what are you sorry for? I'm the one putting pressure on you. Well, I should go now to prepare for the banquet. Gee, good luck. So Raleigh takes his carriage and leaves for his mansion, Durham House, and evening falls, but the area around Durham House is still brightly lit. This was because of the many dignitaries gathering for the banquet. All sorts of notable nobles, wealthy merchants, and gentry from prestigious families gathered, all wearing dazzling ornaments. All of them wore aluminum brooches and necklaces that had been fashionable in London for several years. They gathered in Durham House's splendid banquet hall like statues, whispering among themselves, "Thank you for waiting, everyone. Today's ingredients are coming out." Then, along with the host of the banquet, all kinds of fish and meat are displayed in the banquet hall. The guests cannot help but be amazed at that moment. My goodness! Do you see that? How many of those are there? It wasn't because of the fresh vegetables, fish, and meat sourced from all over England. It was because of the styrofoam boxes filled with ice that contained them. Even the Duke of Norfolk could only gather 50 styrofoam boxes. Goodness! It's as if all the styrofoam in England has been gathered here. The reason why ice vendors around London increased rapidly. The cause of the culture of showing off fresh ingredients before banquets. Thanks to styrofoam boxes, the freshness of high-end ingredients distributed in England had skyrocketed. Styrofoam boxes were also preciously distributed as a symbol of prestige, showing that one enjoyed eating rare Shine Muscat, Ruby Roman, and Black Sapphire grapes. The gathered nobles sat in their respective seats, holding aluminum cutlery, eyeing the ingredients in styrofoam boxes with greedy eyes. Here, today's wine has been substituted with Virginian instead of Bordeaux. Everyone, have a taste. Not Bordeaux? You're saying it was transported across the sea. No matter how fast Lord Raleigh's ships are, that's a bit. Gulp. Oh, I've never experienced such flavor. Aluminum cutlery instead of silver, American wine instead of French, styrofoam boxes on the dining table. Where is Sir Drake now? Probably happily plundering Spaniards along the Caribbean coast again. Margaret avoided this banquet, saying it was too lavish. But in a way, it was actually the most frugal banquet in London. At least, that's how it was. Chapter 75 Car. I returned to Crotone Island after a long time, precariously carrying the highjet on a barge. The reason for bringing the highjet was obvious. There's hardly anything pointed to load and carry from Crotone Island. The highjet may look quite pathetic, but that's only from our 21st century perspective. The power this tiny car's engine can produce is a whopping 35 horsepower. Of course it looks ridiculously pathetic, but as mentioned earlier, that's by 21st century standards. Let's think about what the standard of horsepower actually is. Horses. Horses. From the perspective of this era, where horses pull carts, wouldn't the highjet have tremendous power equivalent to a carriage pulled by 35 horses? Bump. Guess not. Anyway, after disembarking from the barge, I'm now driving along the well-paved, by 16th century standards, road, but I feel like I'm going to go crazy with anxiety every time I hit a rock. What if this thing tips over? If I were just driving it empty, that would be one thing, but since I'm carrying various equipment for maintenance at the Chesapeake settlement, it's incredibly nerve-wracking. Bump. Clank. Wait a minute. Why is the wind blowing from the side right now? Come on, no way. It's still a car. It's not made of cardboard or corrugated paper, but steel. How could a steel car be blown over by the wind? Crash. It can. I thought I was going to die. Actually, to be precise, I already died once. I can feel my broken ribs rattling inside my body. Normally, this would be 100% fatal. The reason I can state this so definitively is clear. Medicine in this era is so underdeveloped that statements like, "You have too much blood in your body. Let's drain some," and "blood circulates around the heart." What? I've never even heard of such a thing. Are commonplace. If your ribs break and puncture your internal organs, you die without even having a chance to do anything about it. You just die painfully. But I survived.
I'm recovering.
I could feel the bones inside my body knitting back together and the wounds in my organs healing. Right? Thanks to the immortality cheat, I've survived countless near-death crises. I should be grateful for just that. If I hadn't fallen into the 16th century, there wouldn't have been any life-threatening crises either. Getting my heart stabbed by suddenly appearing Spanish soldiers, having my entire body turned into an exhibition by some assassins, or like this, dying defenseless when the highjet overturns on a remote, unpaved road. I guess the last one is quite possible in the 21st century too. Suddenly, cold sweat runs down my back. After escaping from the car through the broken window in my blood-soaked clothes, I finally realize, if I had driven this piece of junk, I would have met my demise someday even in the 21st century. Did Fansuka Software actually extend my life? Indeed, I'll bow 3 times a day in the direction of Montreal, France, where the Fansuka Software headquarters is located. No, I didn't originally drive such a garbage car. Maybe not in the city, although it's still dangerous in the city, but in the countryside with many narrow, rough, winding roads that aren't properly paved. Driving something like a hijet is just perfect for enjoying a naked swim in the Jordan River. You think I'd just drive this car because I'm crazy? This coffin that's slightly less than 1 ton. This car that tilts and overturns when the wind blows a bit strongly. With or without reason, anyone who drives a hijet is a crazy bastard? Why are you rubbing salt in my wounds? I also had a better car than this, damn it.
À 2017 porteurs.
Double cab, long wheelbase, 4-wheel drive, solid one. I used it to transport grapes to the direct sales store, and while posing in the driver's seat, I'd fill a corner of the local newspaper with articles like Shine Muscat? Not dead yet. The cry of a young farmer. Anyway, that's how it was. Until the flood washed it away to the small mountain behind the farm. By then, my income level had already started plummeting vertically, so there wasn't much I could do. Honestly, it would have cost more to retrieve it and send it to the junkyard, so I just left it there. Those bastards, selling watery-tasting Shine Muscat and ruining the brand value, they should go to grape farmer's hell. Anyway, after that, I got a 92 model year hijet for 300,000 yen as a used car. A hijet that I barely drove, which was about to go to the junkyard. Huff, huff, huff. The hijet that will be found in perfect condition in the warehouse once midnight passes again. This hijet was my temporary personal vehicle, but now it has become my life vehicle. Forcibly. I went to the back of the overturned hijet and loaded the various packages that were in the trunk onto my back. Ugh, it's heavy. I was just complaining about the hijet, but now that even that hijet is gone, I'm going crazy. The paint cans and other items I brought from the coast have already spilled and made a mess. I'll just say goodbye to them, thinking they're abandoned now. See you after midnight. This is really pathetic. I want to go back to the 21st century. I'd even go into debt to get my car back. If I just had my porter, I could easily move these packages. The porter is used as a weapon in civil wars in foreign countries. What would the hijet be used for? Scrap metal? A coffin? Anyway, leaving behind the hijet that was crumpled like paper, I walk step by step, and my legs tremble and my body shakes. Even though my strength has increased enormously since coming to the 16th century, I'm in this state. After walking for about an hour and a half. I'll live. I finally changed out of my blood-soaked clothes and lay down on the bed. The people who remained in the settlement rushed over when they saw me covered in blood. But since everyone knows I don't die anyway, I brushed them all off. I just wanted to rest first. I clenched my trembling hands and sighed. Why did Immortal Order Origin launch right when I was driving a hijet? Could it be that I received the immortality cheat because of the hijet? Was there an agreement among the Fansuka Software executives like, his personal vehicle is a hijet, let's give him a cheat so he doesn't die? Anyway, wow, I've seen people get into traffic accidents, go to another world, get reincarnated and get transported, but getting transported and then having a traffic accident is quite novel. Now, I want to give everything up. Give it up. And so I dozed off to sleep. In my dream, I saw a scene from the past. It was definitely the day of the flood. Thankfully, this house, Pseudo Green Gables, built by my mother who was a huge fan of and of Green Gables, was built with a high foundation to suit Japanese conditions, so it wasn't flooded. The problem was the field. To this, damn it, the grapes are all ruined. The grapes all taste like water. Just as I was cursing the damnable Japanese climate and Emperor Jimu's masochistic starting position selection for raining heavily right before harvest season, it happened. At that time, I saw through the second-floor window casement of the house. The porter parked outside. Crash. It's floating away. Given how late my parents started farming, and the fact that they were fundamentally city people, you can tell we had no connections in the countryside. And since we tried to relocate to a village where we had no connections, we went through all sorts of hardships, and this property was part of that suffering. There was a reason our farm property was tucked away in a very remote part of the village. You can tell just by looking at the fact that out of the 13,200 square meters, several hundred include a small mountain spur. The car crashed there. Ha! Just as I was sobbing over the porter buried in the mud-colored water like chocolate milk, I woke up, and immediately my mind started racing. Wait, items in my house, no matter how damaged, are restored pristinely once midnight passes. Here, what exactly is the precise meaning of restored pristinely once midnight passes? What is restoration? Does it simply mean returning to the original state? Then what is the standard for that original state? For example, if a cultivator that originally rattled a lot due to my neglect gets damaged and returns, does it come back still rattling in that state? No. It comes back in a pristine, shiny state, as if newly purchased and just unboxed. There's a reason I've been using items more roughly in the past few years. Rather than getting ambiguously scratched or strangely damaged, it's better to completely break it and have it restored pristinely. Then, what about the porter that was originally submerged and damaged? The porter. Then, what would happen to it? When I came outside in my pajamas, dawn was just breaking. Of course it would be dawn since I suddenly opened my eyes while dreaming, thinking about the porter. Even though North Carolina is a bit warmer than Japan, it was still a bit chilly coming out in pajamas at dawn in autumn. But I don't care about such things. Since I won't catch a cold anyway, I just squeezed into my sneakers and went outside. Then I grabbed a shovel from the warehouse, kicked the damned hijet that had just returned once, and ran towards the mountainside. At that time, in my dream, and in the memory of the past, I saw you in despair. I saw you submerged and disappearing, buried in silt. But now I can save you, porter. I wiped away the tears that were blurring my vision and ran like crazy. After running and running, I could see the mountain where shepherd's purse and mugwort were growing. I immediately charged towards the place I saw in my dream, holding the shovel. And I dug like crazy. Excavator? That's in Chesapeake right now, so I can't do anything about it. All I can rely on are my 2 arms and 2 legs that will never break. Thud, thud, thud. Getting up at dawn to shovel seemed absurd, but thinking about the something that would return afterwards, I held my 2 arms that were trembling from the cold. Soon it will appear. It's coming. What I've been dreaming of. And finally, clang. When the shovel and something in the soil collided, making a strange and clear metallic sound. I couldn't believe my ears. Looking around, I was stuck in a soil pit about as deep as my waist, and soil mounds about as high as my waist were piled up here and there. And it wasn't just one such pit that I had dug. What? Who suddenly dug the ground? Mr. Nemo? What are you doing there? The villagers were calling me. But my heart was so full that I couldn't even answer and just gritted my teeth. I knelt down as if my legs had lost strength, threw away the shovel, and dug the soil with both hands. Then, I saw it. The deep onyx blue color like the sea. Beautiful curves and straight lines. And the clean driver's seat visible through the car window. Are you all right? You are all right, right? Everyone, please bring shovels over here. If an angel suddenly appeared in dirty pajamas and asked you to bring shovels from the morning, what would you do? You might think they're crazy, but at least our kind settlers followed my words. They each brought shovels and dug the ground with me. And the outline emerged. Premium trim. 6-speed manual transmission. Front seat airbags. External toolbox under the cargo area and spare tire. Plus PTO. Power takeoff. Finally, 133 horsepower. About 3.8 times that of the hijet. It said that with just one of these, a village in a remote area of the third world can sustain itself. I quickly sent the villagers away before they found it strange. I apologized for troubling them early in the morning and gave everyone potatoes baked in butter that I had kept for myself as a snack. And I returned to the front of the porter. Ugh! Ugh! Tears come out. Even when I first realized I had fallen into the 16th century and panicked. Even when I rammed the fence with an excavator and my heart was stabbed, causing momentary cardiac arrest. Even when I was riddled with dozens of air holes by some assassins. Even when my shoulder was sawed by a chainsaw because of that oitoten. I didn't cry. I shed those precious tears here. Lord Fansuku, overwhelming gratitude. That's how much I loved this 1-ton truck. Chapter 76. Warships on the Horizon 1. Is everyone all right? Yes. It feels good to look around the vineyards after so long. I feel like I've returned to my homeland too, though my actual homeland is across the Atlantic, of course. I returned to Croton Island after a long time, and with Hewitt, Eleanor, Vicente, Mantio, the so-called founding members, all together. We were there to manage the vineyards after the harvest and to test the newly made water pumps. The performance of these water pumps is quite good, isn't it? All thanks to the blacksmiths in our settlement. Yes, I'll forgive your blowing off my arm last time when trying to replicate the weed trimmer engine. For this, the pain was excruciating. A white-hot flash followed by numbness as I watched my limbs separate from my body. But seeing what we've accomplished now makes that sacrifice seem almost worthwhile. After installing improvised water pumps connected to drum barrel wood stoves here and there, we could quickly drain water from wetlands all around Croton and begin land reclamation. The formerly sodden earth, which had been unusable for generations, began to firm up under our feet as the pumps worked day and night, their rhythmic chugging becoming the heartbeat of our new settlement. Murky pools that once harbored disease-carrying insects gradually gave way to fertile soil, rich with possibilities. This, too, was an achievement that couldn't have been accomplished without quite a long period of trial and error. Weeks turned into months as we tested different designs, experiencing countless failures before finding success. The community gathered to watch each new attempt, their faces shifting from skepticism to hope as our progress became evident. Disassembling the agricultural machinery I had, replicating parts, trying to copy them exactly but failing, then making only simple machines. The workshop floor was perpetually covered in metal shavings and discarded prototypes. My hands became calloused and stained with oil and rust, the skin cracking at the knuckles as I worked through cold nights illuminated by the amber glow of lanterns. The occasional spark from metal striking metal would light up the darkness momentarily, like shooting stars in our small universe of creation. Making high-performance wood stoves that way, creating floor heating, and then connecting various pipes to move the water pumps. We learned to seal joints with a mixture of clay and plant fibers when proper gaskets failed, discovered how to regulate temperature by adjusting the air intake vents, and eventually understood the delicate balance required to maintain optimal pressure throughout the system. It was an achievement that couldn't have been realized without 21st century steel and materials, but an achievement nonetheless. The recovered scraps of civilization, springs from abandoned vehicles, metal sheeting from collapsed buildings, copper wiring from electronics long since obsolete, found new purpose in our hands, transformed by necessity and ingenuity into something entirely new. These water pumps were the fruits of that labor. After watching the water drain from wetlands everywhere with these hastily assembled pumps, we spread a tent nearby and shared stories. Wait,
Vicente?
you met Sir Drake while sailing on the Nautilus. Yes, well, that's right. Didn't you say that when you were governor of Santa Elena, the English led by Drake turned nearby colonies into wastelands? I heard you withdrew from Santa Elena because of that. That's just something from the past. How far in the past? Exactly 9 years, 5 months, and 2 days ago. For someone who spoke as if it didn't matter, you remember it quite in detail. Well, the colony I poured my life into was destroyed in an instant. Can't be helped. Back then, I used to grind my teeth just thinking about the English, but who would have thought things would turn out like this? Ha 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 ha. Isn't he here because he tried to do the exact same thing to this settlement that Drake did to him? Of course, no one bothered to point that out. Anyway, as that fellow goes around plundering Spanish colonies, he's bound to come to this area. So I've encountered him several times, and he was more interesting than I expected. He's also good at killing people. He was a better person than my first impression suggested. Isn't it about time he returns to this area? That's how we spent our first day back on Croton, talking and then falling asleep. The next day, we earnestly tended to the vineyards, prepared for next year's farming, and looked after the settlement. The place was in disarray since the 300 people living here had become a kind of high-ranking officials, busily traveling back and forth to Chesapeake Bay. We also dusted the houses that had accumulated dirt for a long time. We spent another 2 days like that. Just as I was thinking it was time to return to Chesapeake Bay. Knock, 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 knock. What's that? I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on the door. I quickly changed out of my pajamas and went outside to find Manteo and Eleanor. What's the matter with you two? Something tremendous seems to be happening near the coast. The Spanish guarding the outpost said they saw several large warships. What? Warships, you say? Yes. I hurried to the warehouse, started the highjet, and came out. After picking up the two of them, I drove straight toward the eastern coast. And, boom! What's that? I heard a thunderous sound. Something like an explosion echoed from far away. When I stepped on the accelerator and reached the coast, we soon could tell what that thunderous sound was. There. Over there. Even in the dim light of early dawn, we could see several warships fighting quite close by. Each carried flags of England and Spain. As the English fleet moved northward, the Spanish fleet chased after their rear, firing a barrage of shells. The English ships seemed to have caught an unfavorable wind and eventually gave up fleeing, turning around one by one. As soon as they completed their turn, their loaded cannons poured fire on the Spanish vanguard. The flames and smoke rose over the water surface like stars and clouds. In short, all of that scene was clearly visible. Chapter 77. Warships on the horizon, too. They're fighting incredibly close by. Eleanor was right. Close enough that the Spanish fleet could land right here after the battle ended. Hewitt? Manteo? Tell everyone to gather at the coastal battery. Tell them to bring whatever guns and gunpowder they have. Understood.
Vicente?
Is there any way you could intervene with the Nautilus and accomplish anything? Kaboom! A sudden explosion swallowed my words. Kaya! And made Eleanor scream. Looking toward the sea, a Spanish warship was sinking in pieces. It seemed to have been hit by a shell in the gunpowder storage, causing an explosion. In an instant, flames and ship debris surged over the water surface, and with that, the tide of battle reversed. While the Spanish ships nearby were thrown into confusion as fire spread from the friendly vessel, English warships were each moving to advantageous positions. Massive ships circled around each other, scattering shells and ropes, or dropping troops onto enemy ships to attempt close combat. The Spanish warships, which had been in the position of pursuers until just moments ago, now broke their formation and were being ensnared one by English ropes. Spanish vessels that were hurriedly approaching the shore saw our coastal battery, immediately raised white flags, and returned toward the English ships. The Spanish fleet was disintegrating one by one. Whoa! We won! We won! The English who were standing here cheered, and Vicente, despite being of Spanish origin, also clapped happily. Just as everything seemed to be ending and people were about to return inland. Ha! What are you doing, Mr. Hewitt? We should start heading back.
No.
Something seems strange. What do you mean? The ships seem to be getting closer. What? What are you saying? Oh. When I turned around, the English ships were slowly approaching us. What? Why are they coming here? As I looked around at others in confusion, Vicente calmly said, "The battle just ended, didn't it? And right here there's an English ally where they can resupply." Ah! Soon, small boats were lowered from the ships, and sailors began landing on the shore with rough, hoarse songs. They seemed quite excited, firing muskets wildly into the sky. Long live Her Majesty the Queen! Death to the Spanish! As the cheering people gradually backed away in fear, I too tried to step back just in case. Then Hewitt grabbed me. Don't worry too much. As Lord Raleigh mentioned, doesn't everyone hear Nemo's voice in the language they're most fluent in, as if it were their mother tongue? It would be difficult for them to be so proficient in more than one language. And since they'll come to the village for supplies anyway, it's better to meet them here than awkwardly there. All right. Oh, what should I do? My farm? Should I hide it? No, is there a need to hide it? While I was pondering these things. Ah, gentlemen. Damn it, we won. Whoa. We won. Bang. 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 In the middle of the men who had disembarked from the boats, I could see one man shouting vigorously. If he weren't on our side, he would have given the impression of a complete madman at first glance. Who is that man? That man is Sir Francis Drake. Hey, you there, Vicente, and hello to the rest of you. Oh, Francis Drake, the pirate captain and English naval commander appointed by Queen Elizabeth. It seemed true that they had met several times before. Drake approached Vicente with a friendly greeting, and Vicente likewise grabbed his outstretched hand and said, Sir Drake, it's been a while. What brings you here? Well, I was passing by and thought of this place. No, I was passing by and saw those fellows with lots of money. So I asked them to share a bit, but they chased after me like madmen. I came here to rest along the way, and to see the saint, to see aluminum, to see the native emperor. Ah, is this the Saint of London? Pleased to meet you. I am Sir Drake.
Eleanor Dare.
Nice to meet you. I'm Hewitt. Then, who is this? That. I think I know. Drake suddenly begins to bow even though I haven't said anything yet. I pay my respects to the great emperor of the natives in this area. Excuse me, Sir Drake. Did you know how to speak Spanish or Latin? A little. Just enough for survival, trade, and formalities. Nice to meet you. I'm Nemo. Reassured by Drake's answer, I quickly spoke up, and when Drake heard my response, his eyes widened momentarily, and then, Hello, I am Francis Drake, the Queen's pirate. He responded as if nothing was unusual. Indeed, it seems he can't be fluent in more than one language. The catalog said he came from a middle-class background. Drake shook my hand vigorously with a hearty laugh and then asked me directly, Do you happen to have any spare water and food? We do. How much could you provide? We can give you as much as you need. At my words, Drake's face brightened rapidly, and he shook my arm vigorously, saying, Very good, Your Majesty. Very good. Thank you. I see. Then. Now let's prepare to leave.
Vicente?
I'll make sure to kidnap your family properly when we stop by the Florida colony. The rest of you, farewell. You're leaving already? What? Haven't I seen everything there is to see in this settlement? I've seen the saint, the emperor, water, and food, so I must return. I am a man of the sea, you see. Besides, I have assets borrowed from the Spanish piled up now, so I must return to England before others extort them. Is he insane? Well, he's a man who funds a year of the national budget by pirating from the strongest country of the time. It would be stranger if he weren't a madman. Ah, there's one more thing I should tell you. What is it? The Spanish are growing their Florida colony down there. They seem to feel threatened by the Virginia colony. So be careful, as there might be trouble from the south. I understand. Oh my! I forgot yet another thing. Wait a moment. Drake rushed out hastily and soon shouted something toward his fleet, which was docking one by one at the shore. Boats were lowered from each ship, and people came ashore in various places. As the area became noisy, I too approached closer, wondering what was happening. Everyone, gather around. At someone's shout, Naked men and women slowly moved their bodies. Watching them, Drake said, "I accidentally took them on while plundering several Spanish ships. There's no one to buy them if I take them to England, and I might even be criticized, so I was worried, but fortunately, a buyer has appeared." Those people were, "You probably need a lot of labor. How about it?" They are. Yes, that's right. They're all slaves. They were all black people in chains. Chapter 78. Aluminum for Souls 1. Slave Trade. According to what I saw in the Immortal Order catalog, the slave trade in the 16th century era was a field dominated by Spain and Portugal. That was the natural result. They were the only ones with colonies where slaves could be brought to work. While England, France, the Netherlands, and others would begin expanding overseas in earnest after the 17th century, right now the only colonial empires were those two. The Spanish and Portuguese used numerous slaves to extract profits from their rapidly expanding new territories. However, the native population declined rapidly due to smallpox and other epidemics, and later, when the enslavement of natives was prohibited altogether, they turned to slaves from elsewhere who were relatively stronger against diseases and whose supply sources were relatively closer. These were the slaves from West Africa. When various kingdoms or tribes invaded and abducted others, the American colonies would purchase those slaves. And when they transported gold, silver, and various cash crops produced by slave labor back to their homeland, they would use those luxury goods to pay the African dealers and slave producers to buy more slaves. This is the infamous Atlantic Triangular Trade. And Drake raided ships and colonies engaged in this trade. He killed people indiscriminately, burned houses and fences, and thoroughly swept away all remaining treasures and property. But, well, think about it. Where would we use slaves we capture? The black slaves were what he had acquired in the process. I heard you have previous experience as a slave trader. Yes, that's true. But wasn't that before the war with Spain? What should I do with these slaves? Would I keep them? People who have no particular use, just to feed, house, and clothe them for the sole reason of wanting to look important. Wouldn't that be spending more than I earn? Then do I sell them? Where? English people would refuse to buy slaves for exactly the same reason as me, and what's left are the Spanish. You stole them from the Spanish, though. Moreover, since we're at war, he can't sell them back. I'm not running a charity, so I can't take them back to their homes in West Africa and free them, can I? I'd go bankrupt. In truth, it didn't seem likely that such a conscientious person would choose to make a living as a pirate. Someone who had just been happily massacring Spaniards, and then suddenly says, "Ah, these are slaves. I must liberate them," would be less kind and more like someone who was broken somewhere. But, like this, who would have thought an English ally and colony would appear so close to my business area? Did he just call the sea where he pirates his business area? Anyway, isn't it fortunate? If your majesty would purchase them, though I don't know how many. Suppressing a sigh, I said, "All of them." Pardon. I will purchase all of them. Drake seemed momentarily stunned, his mouth open and eyes blinking. Then his face brightened as he said, I guess you needed even more labor than I thought. Impressive. However, the price is quite steep. Would it be acceptable to pay it all in aluminum?" Sir Drake, who had momentarily stiffened, now showed a broad smile and said, "Of course. Boys, we hit the jackpot. Quickly connect the slave's shackles and remove the shackles. What if they run away?" When I said nothing, Francis Drake began to observe my reaction. And when he realized that I noticed him watching my reaction, he began to observe the reactions of those around us. Then Drake closed his eyes for a moment as if thinking. Aha! He opened his eyes again and gave me a subtle smile. I, Francis Drake, have honestly not lived my entire life according to the Lord's words, but I roughly understand your Majesty's intention. Your Majesty is a true Christian. I too have actually always felt a deep loathing for the institution of slavery, so I haven't said anything yet. And weren't you a slave trader? that said, "Your ability to read the room is freakishly good." I feel great. I'll hand them over for half the price I originally intended to charge. How could I sit and calculate profit when doing the right thing? Ha 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 ha. Wow, I almost thanked him without realizing it. It seemed odd coming from someone who just said he had no place to sell them and was troubled, but it was so natural that I almost fell for it. Well, it doesn't matter anyway. Why you're giving me this much? I clearly said I would only take half. Why are you so surprised? You're doing a good deed, so I should help. It's just aluminum foil and clips pressed together, and he'll be overjoyed when I give it to him. Drake now bows to me with his mouth stretched in a grin. Your Majesty, may you have longevity and good health. I hope the friendship between England and your Majesty lasts forever. Now then. Wait. Yes. What are you going to do now? Well, originally I was planning to return to England, having successfully completed piracy. No, I mean the redistribution of resources. Now I should return to my homeland to enjoy that joy with Her Majesty the Queen. Shouldn't I? And after that? Don't you know? I am a pirate. Drake claps his hands once and tells me with gleaming eyes. Piracy begins again. I love doing this. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. He's already proudly declaring he'll break 2 of the 10 commandments, yet just a few seconds ago he was talking about being a Christian. Then, as you pirate, remember one thing. Of course, as long as it doesn't conflict with my oath of loyalty to my sovereign, Queen Elizabeth, I will fulfill any request. It's not a request. Rather, it's a proposal that will benefit you. What is it, Your Majesty? My interest is piqued. Can I trust this person? His impression is perfectly optimized for fraud and extortion. No wait. He's already leading an armed robbery gang roaming around everywhere. What could be more ridiculous than asking if such a person can be trusted? This is the Queen's favorite? What kind of country is England? Anyway, in any case, now that I've confirmed slaves are being captured, there's something I must do as a matter of principle. In the future, when you raid the Spanish, when I battle with the Spanish, when you battle with them and discover detained slaves, bring them here. I will compensate you as I did this time. At my words, Drake's eyes widened again. After seeming to ponder for a moment, he nodded vigorously and said, Of course, Emperor, for you, and for the cause of our Lord who abhors slavery, I will do so. Our Lord probably abhors piracy too. Not that it's any of my business. Equals. Francis Drake. He is known as a fine friend and colleague of John Hawkins, England's first slave trader. Following his cousin John Hawkins, he began in his early 20s traveling between the West Indies and West Africa, either capturing slaves directly or capturing Portuguese ships that had captured slaves. His successful career thus begun continued onward, and after 1569, he became Queen Elizabeth's reliable money bag, enjoying tremendous honor. This is what sets him apart from other pirate rabble. With his innate gangster disposition, he knew whose territory he was in. His nose sensitively smelled power, and he knew who was the most absolute big boss in this area. So instead of reveling in the enormous profits equivalent to several years of the national budget, he offered most of it to the Queen. He had a good sense of awareness. A remarkable survival instinct always flickered in his eyes and ears. This is a proposal from an important ally who dramatically improved England's trade balance. A major customer who fills the English royal treasury with luxury goods and buys all sorts of luxuries and necessities from England, such as sugar, spices, and woolen fabrics. He offered a deal in exchange for freeing slaves. Moreover, he knew well what his relative and prominent slave trader Sir John Hawkins had done to meet his demise recently. He went to the Saints' Clinic, caused trouble demanding medicine, and died from divine punishment. He probably died from some poison, but since people generally spread such rumors, it was easier to accept that as the truth. In other words, the time for cutting ties had come. How long has it been since I directly engaged in the slave trade? Not like this time where slaves came along as a side branch during battle with Spain, but the work of directly purchasing and exporting slaves. It had been over 20 years. John Hawkins, who worked in the slave trade and even put a shackled Moorish slave on his family crest, died from divine punishment. And a sponsor who would pay money for freeing slaves appeared. What is this? A spirit of the sea. Chapter 79. Aluminum for Souls. 2. Not just any sponsor. A sponsor who speaks Spanish, Portuguese, one who performs impossible miracles. A magician? A mystery of the sea? The sea is truly amazing. To have such a wondrous experience. Of course, Drake could accept it without difficulty. He had already seen numerous miracles at sea. Like a seagull speaking human language, a hallucination due to vitamin deficiency during long voyages, or a mermaid, it was a dugong. Thanks to such experiences, Drake was sufficiently superstitious like a sailor, and he could incorporate this strange experience with the native emperor Nemo as just another page in his adventurous life. That is, what mattered to the great Captain Drake right now wasn't such things. From the beginning, there had never been any good that came from lengthy encounters with sea mysteries. Naturally, it's difficult to see anything good when in a mentally and physically weakened state due to vitamin and various nutritional deficiencies. What mattered to him immediately was the deal. The deal. Yes. From now on, he is no longer the fine friend and colleague of John Hawkins, England's first slave trader. Gentlemen. What does this look like to you? Why are you asking such things without even letting us rest on land? There was a reason for all that, so shut up and answer. Ah, isn't it aluminum?
No.
This is the fruit of great freedom and the just reward that comes from morality and ethics. Now he is the liberator of slaves, a friend of freedom and justice. We're going on another job. Target the area near Cuba.
Ah, understood.
If you see people who look like slaves, treat them all with respect. They're our new source of money. Whoa! He is a friend of aluminum. And so Drake once again set off on a journey toward the Lord's light and justice. As for the deaths that occur along the way, let's consider them natural causes. We returned to Chesapeake Bay after our extremely bizarre meeting with Drake. Everyone was dumbfounded by the perplexing experience, but there were things to do first. What is your name? How do you speak our language? Gee, good heavens.
No.
That was my tribe's language. My tribe's people all died. How could? Everyone, please calm down. You are safe now. After removing their shackles, all the slaves stirred and bowed awkwardly to me. They seemed to think I was their new owner. Are you our new master? Someone asked in Spanish, and I immediately replied, You no longer have masters. Then his face filled with a complex mix of fear and awe from hearing multiple languages in his ears, and joy from understanding my words. How? Could you tell me where your homeland is? $@ I heard a language I couldn't understand or pronounce properly. The Japanese patch installed in my brain soon translated it as Sierra Leone. When I turned on the world map on my phone, I could immediately confirm Sierra Leone's location. Sierra Leone is about 7,000 kilometers away from here. Are all of you from the same place? Most of them nodded at my words. I said to Vicente, who was standing beside me, How much longer until the Voyager is completed? Voyager, the name of our second clipper ship under construction. Only a month or two left. Good. Let's take them to Africa on the Voyager. According to what I read in Anno 1800, clipper ships originally carried perishable cargo, and given the era, slaves were 100% included in that. Whatever the case, it's an appropriate ship to use while Spain is searching for English vessels in the Atlantic with fire in their eyes. Because it's fast. Now it will be used to escort freed slaves back to Africa. So, exploring this coast with the Voyager is still difficult, you're saying. That's right. To look around the area first, we'll need the Nautilus. Would you like to join us? I nodded at Vicente's words. Haven't the English and Spanish fleets just clashed quite significantly nearby? There might be effects in the area. There could be shipwreck survivors. Good. After wrapping everything up, we boarded the Nautilus and explored the southern coast after the battle. And there should be a village around here. Several villages had been abandoned empty. Tribes hiding in the forest out of fear from the night's thunderous sounds. Countless corpses and battle debris washed up on the shore. Rotting limbs of Spaniards, English, natives, and black slaves. Drake was a cheerful person, but he led dozens of warships and thousands of soldiers. Our community now has at most 20,000 people, while they command armies of tens of thousands and populations of millions. Each time these giants engage in battle, thousands die and tens of thousands are stirred up. Sir Drake mentioned that the Spanish are growing their Florida colony. Yes, it seems they're trying to check us. Those repercussions won't reach us, will they? Probably not. We could only pray to remain safe amidst it all. The Council of the Indies under the Spanish Empire seriously considered the disappearance of Vicente Gonzalez. An epidemic broke out in the area, and natives attacked, resulting in the annihilation of about 200 troops. Thinking about it now, wasn't it the doing of that savage emperor? At most, he's probably just a particularly strong Indian chief in the area. So you're saying a local group powerful and skilled enough to crush 4 warships and a force of 200 soldiers has joined hands with England? The Virginia colony's population now numbers in the thousands. To overthrow them, we would now need to dispatch a large force of at least 2,000, possibly up to 5,000 men. Meaning, they cannot be overthrown. A perfect intermediate stopover has emerged for the English, who stick to you like vicious swarms of mosquitoes or midges. No, not just an intermediate stopover. It's a new territory that fills England's perpetually tight treasury and prospers enough to not only be self-sufficient but even export food to England. Moreover, considering their propaganda about angels and such, the political significance is even greater. From the perspective of the Spanish colonial authorities, an irritating threat had arrived. For now, shouldn't we protect our Florida colony first? I think we've become too vulnerable since abandoning Santa Elena and other areas. That's right. First, we must strengthen the defenses around Santa Elena and expand the colonies near Florida. Further retreat will only create strategic threats. And so, the Spanish colonial authorities made a decision. Expand the colonies. Thus, the government of Spanish West Indies began a colonial expansion movement. They supplied weapons and resources to San Agustin and allied tribes in the area, instigating conquest of new lands. The result was clear. The Spanish-allied Apalachee tribe drove out the Guayal tribe to the north. The displaced Guayal tribe then plundered the Muskogee tribe. The Muskogee tribe declared war on the Catawba tribe. The Catawba tribes were pushed northward, threatening the Tuscarora tribe. The large and small movements taken by Spain toppled the native societies in regions that would in the distant future be called Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina like dominoes. An unprecedented drought persisted. Amid this, Spain's light precautions caused them to move to the more barren and cold north instead of the warmer south. Thousands, tens of thousands who lost their homes and homelands wandered aimlessly with weapons in hand. Their eyes were now filled with confusion, anger, and sadness. Gee, good heavens! Why they suddenly came north? Where should we go now? Then, the chiefs and great chiefs of various tribes recalled rumors they had heard. In the north, there is a very powerful and wealthy great chief. They say he never lets a visiting guest go hungry, and never turns away those who seek refuge. We cannot defeat him in battle, but we can seek his protection. So we go there, to Croton, and to Chesapeake. Chapter 80. The Convert 1. Beautiful. Perfect weather for setting off to Africa. Walter Raleigh, who had returned before we knew it, said while stroking the hull of the newly completed Voyager. In response, Vicente Gonzalez, who had been selected as the captain of the Voyager, smiled and said, "The Voyager is a bit larger and sturdier than the Enterprise. Perhaps because the craftsmen have become accustomed to building this type of ship, it's superior in every aspect. Still, somehow I prefer the Enterprise over the Voyager. Don't you like the name better? Enterprise, America, the final frontier. Our mission is to explore new worlds, discover new life and civilizations, and boldly go where no one has gone before. Doesn't the name Enterprise fit perfectly with that? But the name Voyager lacks power. But the Voyager can carry more cargo and more cannons. Can't it? That's different. It's a matter of feeling. It somehow feels like it will be stranded somewhere, wander around, as if the name is covered with ominousness. Please don't say such things about someone else's ship. Half joking. The two were soon to cross the Atlantic to Africa with the slaves Nemo had purchased from Drake. The estimated time was about 3 months, a time shortened thanks to the clipper ship's miraculous sailing speed. They watched as the Africans, who had fully regained their health, boarded the ship one by one and said, "By the way, he seems to be against slavery." Although Raleigh only said he, Vicente could easily understand. There was only one person in this settlement whom people referred to as he without any context. That's right. When he unhesitatingly purchased the slaves from Sir Drake, I thought he was being practical, but I didn't expect him to free all of them. The first thing he did after purchasing the slaves was to talk with the newly freed slaves. He asked them where their homeland was, if they wanted to return, and if they could return. Based on their answers, he divided the freed Africans into several categories. Those who would newly settle in Virginia, and those who would return to their homeland. Not a single person remained a slave. Raleigh, having returned and heard the news, carefully phrased a question he had been holding. "You've also traded slaves before, haven't you?" "Me? Of course. I bought commodities like slaves and ivory from various African tribes and sold them to Spanish colonies. I had a few in my colony too. Haven't you done the same, Baron?" "Me? I led a privateering fleet. Of course I have." If he abhors employing slaves, then the Lord must feel the same. I fear how we must appear in the eyes of the Lord, and in his eyes. Who among us is not a sinner in his eyes? Can't we atone for the rest of our lives? Doesn't everyone have a second chance as long as they're alive? The atmosphere had suddenly become somber, and serious conversation was exchanged. The two quietly recited the Lord's Prayer, made the sign of the cross, and disembarked from the ship to make a final check if the voyage preparations were complete. "Virginia, I have arrived." In the midst of which they turned around to see a fleet docking at the coast of Chesapeake. The man with a gallant impression rowing a boat toward them was a very familiar face to both of them. Sir Drake.
Ah, Baron Raleigh.
It's been a while. Quite some time since we've met. You there.
Vicente?
You're right there too. Come help me. Ah, you've come to transport new slaves. Tisk. What? If not slaves, then SSSST. Vicente turned to Raleigh in confusion as Drake suddenly became enraged at his words. But Raleigh was equally puzzled. Drake approached Vicente, seething, and spoke with sincerity. "Slaves? Do you become a slave when captured by the hands of vicious pirates and slave traders in Africa? Would the Lord watch such evil deeds and do nothing?" What? The words, "But you are that vicious pirate and slave trader," rose to their throats, but Vicente barely swallowed them. "Call them liberated freemen from Africa, instead." Understood. Sir Drake. I see your piracy this time had a good harve. Baron Raleigh. You too. Piracy? Piracy is taking what belongs to others. But I have only moved according to the holy cause of restoring freedom to those who have had it stolen. I have accomplished a great mission. Raleigh sensed something strange and glanced back. Then he saw Nemo watching them from a distance. He appeared as tiny as a dot, and it was unclear how Drake had noticed. "I see your great mission had a good harvest?" As soon as he corrected his expression according to Drake's opinion, Drake's seemingly enraged expression instantly softened. Oh, of course. The newly liberated slaves alone number over 300. And I also reclaimed evil property extorted by the Spanish from slaves and Indians. Why is Drake receiving what was extorted from slaves and Indians? Like Vicente, various questions arose in Raleigh's mind, but he barely suppressed them. Looking back again, he saw that he had already come to their side. Sir Drake, you've come. The wound on your cheek. Ah, your majesty. While waging war against the wicked Spanish, I couldn't contain my indignation and stepped forward, getting slightly cut by a sword, but it's fine. What would such a small scar matter to this Drake? That's fortunate. Indeed, had I fallen and died there, who would have saved the hundreds, thousands of Africans suffering under Spanish rule in America? The Lord clearly saved me from death. He's definitely confused. He's confused. Raleigh and Vicente could easily sense the bewilderment on Nemo's face. After seeming to ponder for a moment, Nemo finally couldn't hold back and opened his mouth. Hasn't Sir Drake also engaged in slave trading? You've even directly captured slaves in alliance with local African tribes. At that moment, Raleigh and Vicente felt as if their insides had been cleared out. That was it. That's what they wanted to say. Their mouths had been itching to say it. They had just been talking about whether they were sinners or not. And then this villain of a different caliber comes along and speaks so boldly, it was nauseating.